American Comics, My Warhammer Simulator Chapter 281-300. In fact, it was a coincidence that Strange became Jessica's attending physician, something that even Luo Shah hadn't anticipated. Tony Stark had arranged for Jessica, who was seriously injured, to be admitted to the best private hospital in New York. And as one of the leading neurosurgeons in the entire country, Strange was naturally a valuable resource and guest of honor at various private hospitals. At this moment, Luo Shah, who had gotten to know him, exchanged a few simple greetings with Strange, who had not yet stepped into that unknown world. The topics of conversation were nothing more than discussions about Jessica's condition, as well as complaints and feelings about the heavy snow in New York. However, perhaps vaguely sensing the perfunctory and strange tone in Luo Shah's words, Strange, with a polite smile on his face, used the excuse of not disturbing Luo Shah's visit to the patient and turned to walk out of the ward. After Strange closed the door and left, the brightly lit ward was left with only Luo Shah, who had a peaceful expression, and Jessica, who was lying quietly on the luxurious hospital bed, as docile as a quail. "Boss, you." However, before Jessica, whose eyes were subconsciously darting around, could speak first, Luo Shah, raising a palm, suddenly took out a crystal-clear ice-blue gemstone from the pocket of his black trench coat and threw it towards Jessica's bed. Snap! Jessica, widening her eyes, disregarded her aggravated injuries. Gritting her teeth, she almost instantly raised an arm wrapped in white bandages. She successfully caught the small thing with distinct edges and corners that felt cold and hard to the touch. The next second, Jessica, narrowing one eye slightly, hurriedly brought the ice-blue gemstone close to her open eye, repeatedly examining it. At the same time, like a crouching miser, she asked Luo Shah with a smile, "Boss, what is this thing? Could it be a precious gem that David brought to comfort my injured heart?" "Hey, Jessica, you're thinking too beautifully. Unfortunately, David hasn't had time to care about you recently. This is a panacea that can repair injuries and diseases at the genetic level. You've been lying here for so long, you should get up and move around." Luo Shah, with a gentle expression, stood in place and said in a calm tone, Okay, then how exactly do I use this thing?" Jessica, with a trace of embarrassment on her face, hurriedly grinned. Afterwards, she stared suspiciously at the ice-blue gemstone between her fingers and continued to ask. "According to common sense, it should be melted and injected, but the current conditions don't allow it. You can just eat it. Don't glare at me. This is a suggestion from Professor Connors." Luo Shah stared at Jessica, who had widened her eyes again. The corners of his mouth unconsciously revealed a hint of teasing smile. At this moment, Jessica, with an expression as firm as if she was stepping onto the battlefield again, unhesitatingly stuffed the ice-blue panacea into her mouth and chewed it repeatedly. "Hiss, it feels ice-cold, the taste is okay, even a little sweet." The next second, Jessica, who was describing the taste of the panacea to Luo Shah, began to tremble violently. Immediately afterwards, the bandages and plaster that wrapped most of her body suddenly burst open due to the constant contraction and exertion of her muscles, emitting a series of extremely fine crackling sounds. Soon after, Jessica, with a dazed expression, sat up from the luxurious hospital bed in shock. Luo Shah, with a smile on his face, said to her earnestly, "Battle Nun Jessica, welcome back to the team." The gloomy sky gradually dimmed. The cold temperature dropped significantly once again. Strange, wearing a thick coat, was warming up his black sports car parked in the hospital's rear parking lot. This private medical center was just one of the hospitals where he earned a high-side income. It was not the public hospital where he was permanently stationed. At this moment, he was about to go to another nursing center located in the suburban area of the city to perform one last surgery. "After this surgery, I won't earn any more side money before Christmas. Oh right, I have to remember to bring a gift for Christine when I get back to the hospital." Strange, with a burning cigarette between his fingertips, slowly exhaled wisps of green smoke from his nostrils. He even muttered to himself, subsequently, seeing that the sky was getting late, and the sports car had warmed up, more or less. Strange, whose cigarette between his fingers had burned to the end, casually threw away the cigarette butt. He turned around, opened the car door, and was about to get in and leave. However, at this moment, the corner of his eye inadvertently caught sight of two familiar figures who looked sneaky, quietly walking out of the back door of the hospital. A black-haired girl wearing a black trench coat and a patient gown, and her young boss, whose identity was unknown and who looked mysterious. Jessica? And what was her friend's name? Oh, Rorschach. Strange didn't seem to care. He recalled the information about the two people, while slowly sitting in the driver's seat of the black sports car. After the car door closed, and both hands were unconsciously placed on the steering wheel, Strange, vaguely sensing something was wrong, suddenly remembered. Wasn't that black-haired girl named Jessica trying to leave the hospital because her injuries hadn't fully healed? Wasn't he in the hospital repeatedly stopping her? Now, the other party had actually run away secretly again. It didn't seem to be to avoid medical expenses, so why bother? Moreover, how did the black-haired girl, whose injuries hadn't healed much, get out of bed? Unfortunately, when Strange, who had realized what was happening, once again turned his head to scan the scenery outside the car, the figures of the black-haired girl and the mysterious man had long disappeared. At this moment, Strange, whose thoughts were slightly confused, subconsciously took out his mobile phone. He wanted to communicate with the hospital here, to tell them the fact that the black-haired girl had left the hospital without permission. But the next second, Strange, frowning slightly, suddenly threw the mobile phone in his palm onto the passenger seat. A sigh was vaguely emitted from his mouth. Strange, you're just a surgeon who came here to earn some extra money. Moreover, that black-haired girl is not an ordinary person, she should be a superpower user. You should mind your own business, so as not to cause trouble. Strange, who had quickly made a decision, forcefully stepped on the accelerator of the black sports car. He drove his beloved car, which emitted a violent roar, and began to drive in the direction of the suburbs of the city. Along the way, the snow on the main roads inside the city was cleaned fairly well. However, when the sports car driven by Strange officially entered the suburban area, the complex snow-covered road surface, without any traces of cleaning, forced Strange to drive the vehicle carefully and cautiously. This also made him unconsciously complain about the client for this surgery in his heart. Soon after, the sky outside the car completely fell into darkness. Strange, frowning tightly, turned on the bright headlights of the black sports car. Two bright beams of light shone on a snow-white road ahead. Occasionally, it also reflected more blurry spots of light around. And as time slowly passed, the houses around the desolate road became increasingly scarce, which made this journey to the nursing center look even more eerie. Let's forget about this surgery. I'll give the client a call as soon as possible to explain the situation. After all, driving on the road in this kind of weather is simply courting death. Strange, whose brows suddenly relaxed, took a deep breath. He first glanced at the seemingly unchanging snow-white road ahead. As the accelerator under his foot loosened, the car's forward speed also slowed down slightly. He leaned his body to the side and reached out a palm, reaching for the mobile phone that was thrown on the passenger seat. Boom, 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 at this moment, accompanied by a roar of an engine from a heavy motorcycle. Ahead of the road where the snow-white ground was slightly reflective, a terrifying figure, as if completely wrapped in raging flames, unexpectedly appeared within Strange's field of vision without any warning. Subsequently, that terrifying figure, like an evil spirit descending into the world, also unhesitatingly drove the raging heavy motorcycle. Head-on, it crashed straight towards the black sports car. What the hell is that? At this moment, Strange, who couldn't help but widen his eyes, subconsciously let out a cry of horror. His hands jerked the steering wheel, and his foot also stepped hard on the brake. And accompanied by a series of extremely sharp tire friction and collision sounds, the entire sports car almost rolled over and landed heavily on the desolate ground by the side of the road. Rumble! The sports car's tumbling finally came to a stop. The airbags on the door side and in the center of the steering wheel rapidly inflated and then slowly ruptured, constantly hissing as air leaked out. Strangely, the person suspended upside down in the driver's seat by the seatbelt seemed lifeless. A moment later, he abruptly coughed up a large mouthful of viscous blood from his mouth and nose, taking a deep breath. Only then did he fully awaken from his brief coma. At this moment, Strange, subconsciously groaning, felt his entire brain was emitting a violent roar. Every inch of his bones seemed to have been soaked in formalin solution. Endless pain constantly pierced through his muscle tissue, radiating a burning sensation. Strange strained to open his rapidly swelling eyelids. Dazed, he surveyed everything within his field of vision. He was just about to reach out a hand to pick up the phone that had fallen near his head. But he discovered that his hands were completely unable to exert any strength. "What's wrong with my hands? My hands, wah!" The disoriented Strange cried like a child who had lost a beloved toy. However, the next moment, the raging flames from outside the shattered car window instantly made the confused Strange unable to even cry. Screech. A heavy motorcycle, wrapped in raging flames and seemingly driven from hell, hardly carved a constantly burning brake mark on the snow-white road. Immediately after, a terrifying figure wearing punk-style leather clothes, with a large circle of black chains wrapped around his shoulders, abruptly jumped off the seat. That burning skull head stared straight at the wreckage of the overturned sports car. The firelight condensed in the infinitely empty dark eye sockets constantly expanded and contracted. Judgment on all sins. Everyone who hears these words, run. I can't control it anymore. Zarathos is about to lose control. All men are born sinners. Run, run, quickly evacuate those gathered nearby. Launch eternal revenge against all things in the world that betray God. Zarathos, wake up. This isn't the ancient war. It's Mephisto's scheme. At the same time, along with the expansion and contraction of the firelight in those empty eye sockets, two completely different, blurred voices constantly erupted from the depths of the terrifying figure's flaming skull. It seemed that two completely unknown beings were constantly vying for control of the terrifying figure. At this moment, Strange, struggling to widen his swollen eyelids, didn't even dare to breathe loudly. He seemed to have temporarily forgotten the intense pain coming from his body. He only wanted to quickly undo the seatbelt that was restraining his body, and then escape from this place. However, just as the panicked Strange attempted to use his trembling fingers, devoid of strength, to try and find the seatbelt button, rumble, accompanied by bursts of soaring, terrifying flames that seemed to burn everything around. An extremely powerful explosive impact suddenly erupted from within the terrifying figure's tall body, also taking the wreckage of the sports car overturned on the ground not far away. Once again, it was fiercely overturned. And this sudden tumbling collision completely plunged the defenseless Strange into a state of unconsciousness. Chi. Just at this moment, a portal with a large amount of sputtering sparks quickly opened on the nearby desolate snowfield. The next second, a black, burly man holding a magical staff took the lead in stepping into this place. Subsequently, men and women holding various melee magical weapons in their palms also rushed out of the portal one after another. The black, burly man with a firm expression first looked with shocked eyes at the terrifying figure that was erupting with heavy firelight outward. Immediately, his slightly shifting gaze fell on the wreckage of the nearly completely destroyed sports car. All formal mages, step forward. Immediately prepare the mirror dimension and attempt to set up an array to suppress the Ghost Rider. Intern mages and apprentices are forbidden from joining our battle. Your only task is to quickly contact Kamar Taj and have the Ancient One send more high-level mages. Someone go check the life or death of that mortal. If he's alive, save him. If he's dead, preserve the body. Mages of the New York Sanctum, follow me. Before the words finished, the magical staff in the black, burly man's palms suddenly danced out strands of red energy. In the blink of an eye, it quickly wrapped around the Ghost Rider, who let out a terrifying roar. Crack, crack, crack. Layers of crackling mirror dimension also quickly enveloped the surrounding desolate scene, almost shielding and isolating any external disturbances. Within a short tens of seconds, the surrounding area of the entire suburban road no longer had any soaring flames or explosions, as if everything that had happened before had completely ceased to exist. Underground base. Jessica, wearing a blue hospital gown, was completely sprawled beside the metal round table. She was gobbling down a plate of fragrant grok steaks. Droplets of grease flowed along her slender fingers into the palm of her hand, but they were licked back into her bulging mouth by a pink tongue. Slurp, wah, so fragrant. When I was lying in the hospital bed, what I missed the most was this bite. Jessica, chewing vigorously, blinked her eyes that had almost curved into crescent moons, unable to help but utter a vague sound of praise. Well, eat, when you are completely drained of your last bit of strength by the cruel training, you will also miss those days lying in the hospital bed. Luo Sha, who was looking down and flipping through an imperial book, didn't even raise his head. He said to Jessica, who was eating, in a calm tone. "Oh, by the way, what about your good friend? Didn't you say you wanted to bring her into the fold too?" Just at this moment, Luo Sha seemed to have remembered something. He blinked his eyes and looked up at Jessica's position. And hearing Luo Sha's question, Jessica quickly swallowed a large mouthful of food in her mouth. Choked to the point of rolling her eyes, she had to heavily pound her chest. After taking a long breath, she said to Luo Sha with a helpless expression. Sorry, boss, Trisha's little heart can't handle any more stimulation, she's almost been scared silly. If she only encountered supernatural monsters like vampires, she wouldn't be so embarrassed, but your subsequent extinction operation, and the constant influence of news and public opinion, have made her unable to muster any thoughts of joining the team. However, you can rest assured, Trish basically doesn't know any information, she won't reveal anything to the outside. Hearing Jessica's repeated assurances, Luo Sha's face didn't show any emotional changes. He said in a calm tone, "Even if she tells everyone, it's not a big deal. Anyway, this base is already preparing to relocate. If arranged properly, it can also just implement the Golden Cicada escape shell plan. Besides, mortals who can't understand your and my fighting philosophy, even after cruel training, can't become qualified warriors." Moreover, Bucky and Old John sighed. "Oh, you haven't met Old John yet. He's not an earthling. He's a berserker from the alien civilization Asgard. The cruel training you are about to undergo is their basic method of screening berserkers." Getting back to the main topic, according to the intelligence they sent back from Dongying, the Yoshida family has taken in over 10,000 orphans from all over the world. Among them, the girls will participate in the training of battle nuns. Those whose will and physique meet the requirements will grow into true battle nuns. Those who are eliminated will also be incorporated into the reserve team, learning battlefield medical technology, becoming medical nuns. So, Jessica, work hard. I'm still counting on you to become the leader of the battle nuns. "I know. I understand. I will work hard." Luo Sha's words had just finished. Jessica, whose relaxed expression instantly disappeared, quickly nodded heavily. Subsequently, with a resolute look in her eyes, she immediately ate the remaining steak in front of her in large bites. At this moment, Luo Sha, gazing at Jessica who seemed to have entered a certain state, revealed a fleeting smile at the corner of his mouth. In the brightly lit training ground, Jessica, wearing only a set of sportswear, was being repeatedly besieged by dozens of automated servo robots wielding mechanical tentacles. Empty-handed, she continuously swung her clenched fists. Occasionally, taking advantage of gaps in the attacks, she heavily struck and sent an automated servo robot flying. The heavy mechanical construct was sent flying dozens of meters, crashing onto the metal floor with a deafening roar. And the mechanical tentacles, with their potentially fatal blows to ordinary people, were not much of a challenge for Jessica now. The Panacea's gene repair seemed to have completely activated Jessica's superpowers. Not only did her already terrifying strength continue to grow, but even the regenerative abilities of her flesh and blood tissues seemed to have been greatly enhanced. Simple abrasions and bruises would completely heal within minutes. As for more serious injuries, such as bone cracks or finger fractures, they would also completely recover within a few hours. As a result, no longer worried about Jessica being trained to death, she actually took the initiative to ask Luo Sha to increase the difficulty. And Luo Sha naturally satisfied her suicidal demands. At this moment, Luo Sha, with a slight smile on his face, was standing at the edge of the training ground. He watched Jessica being repeatedly ravaged by the mechanical tentacles of the automated servo robots, while listening intently to a detailed report from Iron Man David. "My lord, the human female you asked me to watch has been covertly monitored by several automated B drones for 24 hours. All her communication information has also been captured by me. I will report to you if there are any new developments." The mechanical voice belonging to Iron Man David continuously emanated from the phone. Luo Sha, his expression returning to indifference, narrowed his eyes slightly. He said in a calm tone, "If no other circumstances are discovered in the end, arrange for her to work at Imperial Heavy Industries." If she wants to transmit information about Jessica or other information about us, quietly send her on her way. Understood, my lord. Also, my lord, the site selection for the second base has also been surveyed. The location is a twin island in the southern Pacific Ocean, near Antarctica. Hearing Iron Man David's words, Luo Sha raised his eyebrows slightly. He asked with a puzzled expression. Twin islands. Oh, the so-called twin islands refer to independent islands that appear to be separated by a dozen kilometers, but the continental shelf submerged below the sea surface connects their foundations. In addition, the seabed nearby is rich in various minerals and is not far from Antarctica, so this location was chosen. All the automated servo robots have been divided into two teams. One team is responsible for excavating a normal underground base, and the other team is excavating the Redidus's foundry. I still remember your little complaint about the first base being located above the foundry. Now this problem is perfectly solved, and you don't have to worry about being sent to the sky by the servo skull. Iron Man David's mechanical voice seemed to reveal a faint mockery of Redidus. Luo Sha, listening intently, couldn't help but smile. He took a deep breath and said to the phone, David, well done, then come back as soon as possible. To be honest, I find it hard to adapt to the days when you, my steward, are not by my side. Thank you for your praise, my lord, I will set off immediately to return. Luo Sha and Iron Man David temporarily ended their conversation. The good news of Iron Man David's imminent return seemed to cheer Luo Sha up. He even walked to Jessica, who was being besieged by automated servo robots. Luo Sha crossed his arms over his chest and loudly pointed out Jessica's difficult battle. Jessica, every war, regardless of its scale, is composed of small segments of battles, and every battle has a purpose, whether it's an assault, lurking ambush, disrupting the enemy's supply chain, or covering the friendly force's advance, or even a breakout action when the battle is lost. Even those chaos forces I've told you about, their seemingly illogical venting of slaughter also has its most fundamental purpose. So, Jessica, what should you do now when facing dozens of automated servo robots? Luo Sha's roar continuously echoed in the roaring training ground. At this moment, Jessica, with sweat dripping from her forehead, dodged the mechanical tentacles of an automated servo robot. She shouted without turning her head. Kill them all. The spirit is commendable, worthy of encouragement. But, wrong. Luo Sha, with his arms crossed, continued to roar mercilessly. What you should do now is break out. Because your physical strength can no longer sustain high-intensity dodging and counterattacks. I know what you're thinking at this moment. Why does that damned Luo Sha always like to charge into the depths of the enemy? I also want to learn this crazy fighting style. That's right. Jessica, suddenly bursting out a roar from the depths of her chest, used a hard fist, revealing some white bones, to smash an automated servo robot. But a mechanical tentacle, cutting through the air, also heavily struck her spine, leaving a terrifying scarlet bloodstain. Jessica, gasping for breath, quickly widened her eyes and once again began to dodge. Are you stupid, Jessica? That's because I always wear power armor. Even the weapons I use are the best equipment. Moreover, I also have the combat ability and physical strength to completely kill the enemy. If I didn't put on power armor, I wouldn't choose to collide head-on with a large number of enemies, but would instead seize the opportunity to lurk and ambush. When necessary, I would also turn around and run, to find another opportunity to fight. This is the true way to survive on the battlefield. Luo Sha, expressionless, stared at Jessica's agile body moving back and forth and her extremely violent panting. Countless sweat dripped from her body onto the metal floor. At this moment, Luo Sha was ready to call a halt to all the automated servo robots. However, Jessica, who had just been completely besieged to a dead end by the mechanical tentacles of several automated servo robots, suddenly widened her eyes. Ha! She subconsciously let out a loud howl from the depths of her throat. Her two thick legs, covered in sweat, suddenly bent, and her feet stomped hard on the metal floor. The next second, Jessica, who had jumped high, actually quickly floated into the air, not falling for a long time. Tisk. Flight ability. Superpowers are really unreasonable. Luo Sha, with his arms crossed, slightly raised his chin. He stared at Jessica, who was laughing loudly in midair, and couldn't help but let out a sigh. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. The daily routine at the underground base seemed to have returned to normal. Roach led Jessica through a grueling training regimen that lasted almost 14 hours each day. Aside from the breaks for meals, sleep, and bathroom visits, Roach would also drag the exhausted Jessica to study how to command a combat squad, or even larger groups of combat personnel. Perhaps it was this near-death experience and severe injury that truly changed some of Jessica's views and ideas. Her growth and absorption of combat training and war knowledge far exceeded Roach's expectations. Roach noticed this as well. Therefore, he decided to take advantage of the approaching Halloween opportunity to prepare a small gift for Jessica. Soon after, Roach got up and went to the still roaring forge workshop. He found Astartes, who was meticulously crafting precision metal parts by hand. However, when Roach proposed to the servo skull that he wanted to temporarily cut in line and forge a set of power armor for a battle sister, Astartes, with red light flashing in its eye sockets, seemed to have suffered a great shock. It frantically hammered the forging platform with a short mechanical pincer, and shouted at Roach through its voice synthesizer. "By the Emperor, even if you are a Primarch, you can't treat me like a wishing machine, can you? My poor forge workshop. All the production lines are already operating beyond capacity. First, there's the mind-controlled Legion for the substitute plan, and a new type of flying vehicle still in the design and modification phase, Primarch. I've even temporarily commandeered the laser gun production line. Where would I find the extra production capacity to manufacture power armor for you? Astartes, how come I remember that your forge workshop hasn't stopped for a moment since the meeting ended? Just how much stuff have you produced?" Roach raised his eyebrows slightly and turned to look at the automated servo robots passing by in the corridor. Countless materials and parts were being transported back and forth by them. He took a deep breath of the scorching air and turned back to ask the servo skull. "Didn't you say you wanted a complete mind-controlled legion? This was an important decision passed by the Round Table Council. Primarch, you wouldn't want to go back on your word, would you?" Astartes, with red light constantly flashing in its eye sockets, floated up and down, propelled by its anti-gravity engine. However, a hint of guilty conscience seemed to be revealed in its mechanical voice. "What I said to you was, a mind-controlled legion that could give the enemy a surprise, used to replace the so-called Terra Planetary Defense Force, a cannon fodder-level mind-controlled legion, not a complete mind-controlled legion. Astartes, tell me, how many little toys have you made these days?" At this moment, Roach narrowed his eyes slightly and gently lifted the hem of his upper garment. The familiar plasma pistol was also clearly exposed within Astartes's field of vision. "Ha ha ha, Primarch, you're joking with me. I haven't made much. It's still very difficult to conquer a planet." Hearing Roach's question, Astartes, floating in midair, suddenly let out an extremely awkward mechanical laugh. However, its mechanical voice also seemed to be filled with apprehension. "How many are there? Tell me, you know I wouldn't really destroy you, would I?" Roach smiled and slowly reached out to grasp the plasma pistol. His gaze stared directly at Astartes, and he said lightly. The next moment, Astartes, with red light flashing in its eye sockets, quickly approached Roach. It drove the anti-gravity engine to float up and down, and said cautiously, "Primarch, you're really joking. The number of mind-controlled legions is currently only 1,000, but these are not those automated servo robots made of weak materials. Every little guy in the mind-controlled legion is a war machine capable of suppressing a city district. Among them, the number of grotesque guard, capable of both ranged and melee combat, is about 500. With several sturdy mechanical tentacles, they can wield chainswords or power swords, completely becoming terrifying assault monsters in the eyes of the enemy. Equipped with bolters or laser weapons, they can also become Sage Guard focused on fire coverage. Moreover, due to the fatal flaw in the initial design, their power sources are basically exposed, and the power source, known as the radiation furnace, can also bring extremely terrifying radiation damage to the enemy. When necessary, they can even remotely control the grotesque guard to become a small dirty bomb. Didn't you complain to me before that the Hellhammer-type laser cannon was difficult to control by a single person and also very difficult to use? Now you don't have to worry at all. Because the fortress-type mind-controlled machine soldiers, whose height and size are close to Terminator power armor, have been individually modified by me into mobile self-propelled turrets. Unfortunately, I haven't seen the blueprints for the concussion hammer, otherwise, the melee ability of the fortress-type mind-controlled machine soldiers would be difficult for even ordinary Astartes to resist. However, limited by the heavy restrictions on the production of Hellhammer laser cannons and many materials, the current number is only 50. The remaining 400 or so are basically Vulture-type auto drones. After all, air superiority is also needed on the battlefield. You have already used them, so I won't introduce them to you any further. The servo skull Redditus carefully introduced its many masterpieces. At the same time, it turned its red light flashing mechanical eyes to examine the changes in Roach's expression. When it unexpectedly discovered that the Primarch, with his eyes narrowed, did not show any unusual emotions. Redditus's mechanical voice clearly raised several tones. Respected Primarch, if you are still not satisfied, I can also manufacture a powerful machine soldier called the Death Thrall Machine Soldier for you. This is a demi-mechanical warrior known as the Mechanicus version of the Astartes. Your gang dogs, who have undergone physical enhancement, are the best tools for modification. However, this is the field that my mechanical sage mentor when I was young was best at. I have only seen the scene of manufacturing a few times. If you want to perfectly restore it, there are many difficulties. At this moment, before Redditus could finish speaking, the plasma pistol tightly gripped in Roach's palm was quickly drawn. The muzzle also suddenly aimed at Redditus at close range. His entire person returned to a cold and expressionless state. Staring at the servo skull whose red light in its eye sockets began to shrink drastically. He pulled the trigger without hesitation. Puff, puff, puff. Several scorching blue plasma bolts quickly shot out of the muzzle. The terrifying searing heat instantly melted the servo skull's two short mechanical pincers hanging below the skull and the anti-gravity engine. At the same time, the scorching plasma that quickly collided with the metal wall exploded, completely engulfing several mind-controlled machine soldiers that had not yet been assembled nearby. The next moment, just as the servo skull, letting out a terrified scream, was about to fall heavily to the ground from midair, Roach stepped forward and suddenly extended a hand with sharp fingertips, grabbing Redditus's white skull. He slightly widened his blue wolf eyes. His emotionless, icy gaze stared at the other's mechanical eyes, and he said word by word. Redditus, this is the second time you have disobeyed my orders. Don't take my usual patience and tolerance as something that can be discarded at will. I can tolerate your cleverness and little secrets because I sincerely treat you as a member of the team, a recognized partner, and not a tool resurrected by the Emperor. 3 strikes and you're out. This is also the last time I will warn you. I welcome your invention and creation of weapons and equipment, and I let you mess with modifying any technological creations and seeking knowledge of alien technology. However, any decisions made in my name, or on my behalf, especially this kind of bad attitude that doesn't treat humans as humans, you have to think carefully about whether you really want to do that, understand? Now, there is still almost a week before Halloween. Stopping all mind-controlled Legion production lines and mobilizing all production capacity to manufacture a set of mortal power armor should be barely enough for you, Redditus, right? Of course, you can also choose to resist a little. I can simply recruit someone else through miracles. Maybe super talents like Archmago's Call of the Adeptus Mechanicus are waiting to replace your position. You think so, right, Redditus? Primarch above, Emperor above, Omnisaea above, Omsia above. I know I was wrong. I was really wrong. At this moment, Redditus, firmly grasped in a large hand, suddenly let out a shrill cry of terror. I understand your concerns. And I understand your bottom line. Loyalty that is not absolute is absolutely disloyal. Dear Primarch, I will never make a similar mistake again. I, Redditus, unwaveringly loyal. Manhattan, Greenwich Village. 117A Bleecker Street. Inside this sanctum sanctorum, invisible to ordinary eyes, mage apprentices in robes paced back and forth in the second-floor hall. In their outstretched palms, countless blue runes pulsed repeatedly as healing spells scattered around them. And on the cold floor, covered in ornate patterns, formal mages with missing limbs or severe burns emitted suppressed groans of pain. Only when the cool energy of the healing spells completely enveloped them could they barely alleviate the intense agony they were enduring. Meanwhile, Even Stephen Strange, in a deep coma, lay among the wounded, receiving continuous magical healing. He had miraculously survived. Just then, with a sputtering of sparks, a circular portal suddenly appeared above the ornate floor not far away. Immediately afterward, Wong, slightly overweight with a solemn expression, quickly stepped into the New York sanctum. Frowning, he glanced at the gruesome scene before him. Then walked straight to the black, burly man in the distance, leaning on a staff in his palm. His face almost pale from blood loss. "Master Daniel, how is your injury recovering?" Wong quickly asked the guardian mage of the New York sanctum named Daniel. "Still alive, why did only you come in response to our plea for help?" Daniel, his broad shoulders draped in a mage's robe, involuntarily looked at the exposed chest wrapped in blood-soaked bandages. Then, he blinked slightly, staring at Wong with a solemn expression and continued to ask, "Where's Mordo? Where's Caecilius? Does the Ancient One know about our situation here?" Not long ago, a bizarre situation erupted near the Hong Kong sanctum, with man-eating zombies running rampant. Master Hamir, along with Mordo and the vast majority of formal mages, went there at the invitation of S.H.I.E.L.D. to deal with the impending zombie horde. The remaining formal mages are needed to guard Kamar Taj, so we simply can't spare more manpower. Wong shook his head slightly, his expression grave, and continued. "As for the Ancient One, all the messages have been sent, but we haven't received any response yet. Perhaps the Master is dealing with important matters that we can't participate in." After listening to Wong's brief explanation, Daniel took a deep breath. He tried to suppress the pain coming from his chest and various parts of his body, frowned, and said, "What about Caecilius? Wasn't he not involved in any mission? Whether it's the attack on the Hong Kong sanctum or the ordeal of the New York sanctum, he should bear the important responsibility of a Kamar Taj mage, right? Caecilius's dissatisfaction with the Ancient One is growing almost daily, especially after being seriously injured last time by a guest from the mortal world. I can clearly see the hatred in the depths of his eyes gradually obscuring his heart, which is a taboo for a mage. Regardless of whether he is willing to guard the sanctum, I don't feel comfortable letting him leave Kamar Taj. Master Daniel, the Caecilius you and I used to know may no longer exist." Wong's gaze fixed on Daniel's pale face, and he sighed earnestly. Fate or personality, the Ancient One shouldn't have listened to his desperate pleas and taken him in. At that moment, Daniel, his face pale, also nodded slightly. He moved his dry lips and said softly, "Forget it, this is not something you and I can decide. Wong, let's talk about the main issue. You should already understand the initial situation. The notorious Ghost Rider has lost control once again, and this time the situation seems even more serious than before. Almost all of the 30-plus formal mages who went to suppress him were seriously injured, including me. The Vishanti's white magic power can hardly control the current Ghost Rider. If we hadn't set up the mirror dimension in advance, I'm afraid not only would we not have returned, but even the nearby city of New York would have truly suffered. 7 or 8 million mortals, how many of them can withstand the Ghost Rider's penance stare? Fortunately, the endless mirror dimension can still trap him for a while, but I'm worried it won't last long, because this time the Ghost Rider who lost control seems to be regaining his lost memories. When the gradually returning terrifying power expands to the point where the mirror dimension can't bear it, perhaps only the invincible Ancient One can help us solve this problem." After hearing Daniel's report and analysis of the current situation, Wong, with a solemn expression, pondered for a moment, then nodded slowly and said, "Then we can't give him the opportunity to continue accumulating power, otherwise it will cause an even greater disaster. I need to contact Mordo to see if the Hong Kong sanctum can spare some manpower to help us. Moreover, since the Vishanti's white magic doesn't work, then let's fight fire with fire and try using some black magic. We can't just let the out-of-control Ghost Rider continue to wreak havoc on the mortal world, can we? I think the Ancient One will understand our decision." At that moment, Wong's words immediately drew Daniel's agreement. The black, burly man nodded with a solemn expression. He subconsciously gripped the staff in his palm. Then, with great difficulty, he supported his strong body, which had not yet recovered from its injuries. Crackle. Just then, accompanied by a violent sound of space tearing apart, a space rift with ragged edges suddenly appeared on the front hall staircase of the New York sanctum. "Ah, no. Instantly, two mage apprentices returning from outside with medical supplies were silently cut through their fragile bodies by the space fragments flying everywhere. Those extremely terrifying spatial forces kept tearing at the flesh on their bodies, but did not injure their bones at all. The endless pain, which was difficult to die from in a short time, also caused the mage apprentices to instinctively let out screams. The next second, a tall figure wearing an exquisitely tailored white suit, with a monocle over one eye, an old man with white hair, stepped out of the space rift with his hands behind his back. At that moment, this white-haired old man with a leisurely expression smilingly stared at the mage apprentices who had been torn into bloody skeletons by the space fragments, and said in a calm tone, "If you hadn't come back from outside, the Sanctum Sanctorum's defensive array would have been really hard to get into. Thank you for your cooperation, young people." Before the white-haired old man could finish speaking, the space rift behind him slowly healed, and finally disappeared completely into the air. "Who are you? Why are you invading the Sanctum Sanctorum?" Just then, an angry roar from behind interrupted the white-haired old man's hypocritical reminiscence. With a smile on his face, he slowly turned his strong body. His peaceful eyes, through the monocle, stared at Master Daniel, who was glaring angrily, and Wang, whose face was ashen. "Let me introduce myself, I'm Faustus. I am a tourist from Europe, and also a great magician acting on a whim. I originally came to investigate the so-called Terrestellar Army. After all, old people also need to relieve loneliness and find some fun. But not long ago, the Great Shadow, which had been silent for a long time, suddenly gave me a new prediction. I'm sorry, young mages, I have no grudges with Kamar Taj, but, for my faith and fun, please, die." Underground base. With a calm expression, Rorschach turned and left. The forging workshop returned to its bustling state once more. Only this time, the pitiful Radiatus was no longer working for the Intellectus regiments that it had always dreamed of. Instead, it was resolutely executing any orders from the Primarch. Of course, its first step was to repair the melted and incomplete mechanical devices on its body. Only then could it continue to shine and generate heat for the entire team. Meanwhile, on the inclined road leading to the first level of the base, Rorschach, with his eyes narrowed, was slowly walking upwards. In fact, he didn't experience much emotional fluctuation now. Because since the end of the slum battle, he had been constantly reflecting and summarizing, thinking about letting the Intellectus regiments replace the gang dogs to hold the front line on the battlefield. And the gang dog squad would gradually transform into an elite special squad similar to the stormtroopers. After all, a qualified gang dog required a lot of time and high costs to train. Using them purely to fill the line would be too extravagant and wasteful. As for the real reason why Rorschach punished Radiatus and made it remember the lesson, on the surface, it was because the other party didn't obey orders. But in reality, it was because of the other party's subconscious indifference to human life. The tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus still need a supervisor after all. Fortunately, Radiatus's nemesis is about to return. Rorschach, with his thoughts slowly turning, continued to walk towards the first level of the base. He muttered to himself, dash 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 dash. Clack clack clack, accompanied by a series of subtle sounds of mechanical valves slowly turning. On the periphery of the underground passage, a heavy metal gate was slowly rising. At this moment, Rorschach, with a smile on his face, stood up straight and stared ahead with his hands behind his back. When the metal gate was completely opened, a black metal body as tall as 2 meters was completely presented in his field of vision. That was Iron Man David, who had been away from the base for a long time. "Welcome home, David." Rorschach couldn't help but grin as he smiled. He looked at the familiar figure of Iron Man David and said, "Haha, long time no see, my lord. I think what you miss more is when I helped you deal with the things around you, right?" Iron Man David stepped forward. The blue light in the eye sockets of the metal head kept flashing. In one of its metal palms, it was also carrying a metal iron box that looked quite heavy. Hearing Iron Man David's mechanical voice full of banter, the smile on Rock's face seemed to be even brighter. He also shook his tall body and stepped forward. He raised a palm and patted Iron Man David's always solid and cold shoulder heavily, and said with a smile, Yes, the documents and archives that the Imperial Heavy Industries need me to deal with every day are simply dazzling. I've been looking forward to your return, huh? David, what's in the box you're carrying? Why doesn't it look light? Looking at Rock's questioning eyes, Iron Man David shook his metal head slightly. The blue light in its eye sockets flickered, and it stared at Roche in front of it and said respectfully, "It's not anything important. It's just various metal minerals and some plant samples that I encountered when I was exploring around. Didn't you occasionally mention to me before that you needed to search for some uncommon special substances? I just picked up these things casually to see what you need." "Ah, thanks to you for remembering, thank you for your hard work." After hearing Iron Man David's reply, Roche, with a serious expression, blinked his eyes slightly. He took a deep breath and said, "David, thank you. My lord, this is all my duty, after all, I am your loyal butler." After the words fell, Iron Man David walked towards the location of the base hall with Roche. At this moment, the heavy metal gate behind the two people began to slowly close. Even the dim underground passage gradually lit up with bright lights. In the next moment, Iron Man David, who had regained control of the underground base, seemed to reveal more active emotions in his mechanical voice. It carried the extremely heavy metal box and turned its head to ask Roche beside it. "My lord, I heard that Radiatus caused trouble again." "Yes, it played a word game with me and expanded the production of the Intellectus regiments without authorization. Although the quality is good, I still punished it. Because the place that really makes me unhappy is not because of Radiatus itself, but because of the common problem that every member of the Adeptus Mechanicus has, that is, the extreme indifference to human life. It's not that I haven't thought about using miracles to find other existences to replace the servitor skulls, but I'm afraid of bringing some more inhuman guys. After all, this is extremely common in the Adeptus Mechanicus, and those Mechanicus Magi who often transform themselves into machines are almost inhuman, and how much loyalty they can maintain to me is also a question." Roche, who subconsciously put his hands behind his back, explained to Iron Man David in a calm tone. At this time, Iron Man David, who was listening attentively, slowly shook his metal head, and it agreed. "Your concerns are correct. The servitor skull Radiatus may behave very badly in terms of personality, but its loyalty can be guaranteed. Moreover, this lesson has also made it understand your bottom line, and may change its thinking and style. My lord, please rest assured, I will pay more attention to it in the future and not give it a chance to make mistakes." Iron Man David made a promise to Roche. Roche, with his eyes narrowed, also nodded slightly and stopped talking. Afterwards, the two people successfully returned to the brightly lit base hall. One automatic servitor robot after another squatting in the corner of the wall quickly stepped forward to welcome the arrival of the two people. "Yeah, David." At this moment, accompanied by a loud shout full of surprise. An agile figure that flew across the air at a high speed. Like an arrow leaving the string, it quickly flew towards Iron Man David's direction. Iron Man David slightly turned its metal head. Its eyes, flashing with blue light, stared at Jessica, who was slowly floating in front of it. Even its mechanical voice seemed to have increased a lot of emotional fluctuations. "Miss Jessica, congratulations on your recovery from your injuries, and you have also gained the ability to fly. Oh, in this box that I brought back, there are also some brightly colored and very rare shells, which are small gifts that I specially prepared for you." "Haha, really? Thank you, David." Jessica, whose eyes almost turned into crescent moons, let out a burst of laughter. She suddenly manipulated her suspended agile body to somersault. Then, she floated in front of Iron Man David without touching the ground, constantly urging the other party to take out the gifts for her to see. A few meters away, Roche, who was walking towards the metal round table, slowly withdrew his gaze. He shook his head subconsciously, and at the same time, a gentle smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Buzz buzz buzz. However, at this time, accompanied by a series of subtle sounds of air friction, and a large amount of dazzling sparks splashing everywhere, a small teleportation gate with a diameter of only half a meter suddenly appeared on the metal floor of the base hall. In the next second, Roche, with cold eyes, quickly drew out his plasma pistol from behind his waist. And with Iron Man David's order, one automatic servitor robot after another surrounding the vicinity also suddenly stretched out their mechanical tentacles. quickly stepped forward to block in front of Rorschach. Immediately afterwards, Jessica, who was still acting cute with Iron Man David, also floated into the air with a cold expression. Her gaze was fixed on the location of the teleportation gate. Looking down from a high position, she was ready to launch a battle of heavenly justice. Accompanied by the terrifying sound of flesh colliding with the ground, a familiar figure dragged his mangled, incomplete body with his only remaining arm. He quickly squeezed out of the unstable small portal. Wang. At this moment, the cold-eyed Luo Sha recognized Wang's appearance almost instantly. But when he noticed the other party's face, which was missing more than half, and the bloody body, Luo Sha immediately stepped forward. And without turning his head, he shouted at Jessica, who was floating in midair. Jessica, go to the lab and get the panacea from Connors. And the revival potion too. Hearing Luo Sha's order, Jessica, who was floating in midair, unhesitatingly changed direction. Her nimble figure quickly flew towards the base passage. In the next moment, automatic servo robots controlled by Iron Man David rushed forward. They kept waving their mechanical tentacles, dragging the bloody Wang away to a distance. And also firmly surrounded the shrinking portal, which was about to disappear completely. Dong. Just at this moment, a black claw as thick as a thigh suddenly probed out from outside the portal. As several terrifying fingers pulled haphazardly, they also left several terrifying scratches on the metal floor. However, before the automatic servo robot's mechanical tentacles could launch a counterattack, Ka-cha, accompanied by a soft sound, the portal, which suddenly contracted and dissipated, actually severed the huge black claw as thick as a thigh. Chi-chi-chi. In an instant, pitch-black blood as viscous as petroleum fell heavily to the ground, along with the severed giant claw. The corrosive pitch-black blood immediately corroded the smooth, brand-new metal floor. At this moment, Luo Sha, who was tightly gripping the plasma pistol in his palm, glanced at the unknown monster's severed limb. He quickly came to Wang's side, squatted down and asked, Wang, wake up. What exactly happened to you? Has an external enemy invaded Kamar Taj? Kamar Taj, I need to go to Kamar Taj. At this moment, Wang, who had almost no reaction to external stimuli, seemed to be in a dying state. But he still tried his best to widen his bloodshot, listless eyes. He also tried his best to make intermittent, weak sounds. Invasion, demon god believers invaded, the New York sanctum cannot be lost, magical defense system, must warn, ancient one. Jessica, the panacea, seeing Wang's voice rapidly weakening, on the verge of death. Luo Sha, with a frown, turned his head and let out a shout, almost a roar, towards the direction of the base passage. Even Iron Man David, who was standing beside him, suddenly activated his metal body, seemingly intending to meet Jessica. Boss, here it is. In the next second, Jessica, whose entire figure flashed across the air like lightning, suddenly rushed out of the base passage. She quickly raised one arm and threw a crystal-clear, ice-blue gemstone forcefully towards Luo Sha. Pa! Luo Sha, with a stern expression, quickly got up. He raised his hand and caught the ice-blue panacea. Then, he immediately bent down and forcefully stuffed the panacea into Wang's mouth. Instantly, Wang, who seemed to have lost all sound, trembled slightly all over his body. Even his face, which was missing more than half of its flesh, gradually grew new flesh and skin. Huff. Not long after, Wang, with his eyes tightly closed, vaguely exhaled a large breath from his mouth. Then, lying on the metal floor, he suddenly opened his eyes. Mr. Luo Sha, why am I here? At this moment, Wang, who had just recovered from a near-death state, stared blankly at Luo Sha, who was close at hand, and Iron Man David, who was stepping forward. Wang, I was counting on you to tell me what exactly happened. Luo Sha frowned slightly and took a deep breath. He stared into Wang's eyes and said in a solemn tone, You opened an unstable portal yourself and came here, and that alien severed hand, is that the enemy you encountered? Enemy. In the next moment, Wang, whose eyes were completely devoid of confusion, suddenly sat up from the metal floor. He grabbed Luo Sha's forearm with his only remaining arm and said urgently, The great demon Shadow's believers attacked the New York sanctum. The guardian mages and apprentices were all slaughtered, although we don't know what he wants to do. The sanctum, as a magical defense node, must not be destroyed. If all three sanctums fall completely, the demon gods from beyond the realm will wantonly invade the mortal world. Even if only one sanctum loses its function, the weakened defense capability will cause a series of chain reactions. Even if the extraterrestrial demon gods cannot descend temporarily, their minions will also sneak into Earth, and the harm caused by this is no less than that of the demon gods themselves. Not to mention those demon god believers who will become active again. Mr. Luo Sha, I know that you are one of the human powerhouses in Midgard, and this is not a responsibility that you should bear, but Kamartaj currently does not have more manpower to come to support, and even Master Ancient One cannot be contacted. Please, for the sake of the mages of Kamartaj who have guarded Earth for thousands of years, help us. At this moment, Wang's earnest words kept echoing in the brightly lit base hall. Luo Sha, with a blank expression, stared straight at the other party's eyes, which were full of excited expression. Huff. He was silent for a moment, then took a deep breath. The tall body squatting on the ground slowly stood up. David, notify Redditus, activate 1/3 of the Intelligent Control Legion. Jessica, lead the gang dogs in the base to prepare for battle. Without support orders, stay in the base. Servo robots. Prepare the armor, choose the Terminator power armor. Dash 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 dash. Located on the dressing platform in the base hall. Dozens of automatic servo robots surrounding Luo Sha were orderly installing the metal parts of the Terminator power armor. Not long after, when the last piece of dark and heavy shoulder armor, painted with a white fist logo, was heavily embedded into the Uru metal skeleton covered with electronic muscle bundles. Pure marks, moving without wind, also slowly drooped down. Dong dong dong. Driving the Terminator armor, Luo Sha stepped down from the dressing platform. At this moment, 4 servo-mechanical arms, which had already been modified and were generally thicker, also rapidly extended outward from the position of the power backpack. A layer of dark and heavy ceramic steel shell also slightly reflected light under the bright lights. And at the very front end of the servo-mechanical arms, a Gauss burst gun, filled with a terrifying green light, and a multi-barreled thermal melt, ready to fire. As well as a twin-barreled burst cannon and a triple-barreled Terra I-type laser gun, respectively became the control objects of the servo-mechanical arms. Now, the remodified Terminator power armor worn by Luo Sha has completely become a terrifying existence that can be called a firepower fortress. Any hostile forces, and even demons and monsters, who dare to appear within the scope of the lens will be blasted into powder by him one by one. White leather shoe with traces of blood on the sole. Slowly stepping over the corpse of a black man whose chest had been torn open by sharp claws. The bloody internal organs were scattered all around, constantly emitting wisps of heat. This was the last effort made by Daniel, the guardian mage of the Sanctum Sanctorum, with his life. At this moment, Faust, a white-haired old man with a faint smile on his face, was strolling along a long corridor where space was constantly folding and changing. Right behind him, 2 black golems, 5 meters tall, with goat heads and beast-like bodies, slowly followed, their heavy hooves thudding. One of the goat-headed behemoths seemed to be missing a huge hand with sharp claws. From the unhealed wound, viscous, black, and foul-smelling blood dripped incessantly, constantly corroding the ever-changing ground with its gorgeous patterns. Ji Yuyi's little mouse has been let loose. I just wonder what kind of helpers he will call in. More mages? Or those meddlesome warriors? Or will Ji Yuyi take action himself? Oh dear, whoever it is, as long as they can bring me some rare amusement, they are good children. It's a pity, most of the old fellows who knew me and fought with me for countless years have gone to their graves. It seems that being immortal isn't such a good thing after all. Faust, wearing a monocle, stepped forward on the ever-changing ground, muttering softly to himself. At this moment, he held a cane emitting a black light tightly in his palm. With a gentle wave, countless invisible spells and magical defenses in front of him were completely broken. As many spells and magical defenses gradually became ineffective, the corridor space, which had been constantly changing and rotating, seemed to be fixed, slowly revealing an underground passage leading deeper. Soon after, a bronze door, tightly wrapped with heavy metal chains and more shimmering runes, gradually appeared before Faust. However, just as the smiling white-haired old man was about to wave his cane and continue to inflict damage. "Oh, why are they here so quickly? This is a little interesting." Faust, with a raised eyebrow, suddenly looked up. His gaze instinctively turned towards the ground above, which was obscured by layers of space and architectural structures. "Dear Nibirius, please buy me some time with your split-body brothers. I believe the great shadow demon will remember your contribution." Faust, slowly retracting his gaze, turned slightly. He stared at the two goat-headed, human-bodied black behemoths and said softly. In the next moment, the goat-headed behemoths, without any response, suddenly turned their massive 5-meter bodies and quickly rushed back in the direction they came from. As their figures gradually disappeared, the surrounding space seemed to change again. "Come, Faust, offer a great gift for the return of the great shadow demon." Faust, muttering to himself, turned his head back. He stared intently at the bronze door with its shimmering runes. The smile on his face grew even brighter. Dash 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 dash. Chi, chi, chi. Beneath the floor of the front hall of the Sanctum Sanctorum, an extremely hot red laser easily pierced through the surface, forcibly cutting out a huge circle with a 5-meter radius. Rumble, accompanied by the huge dust and roaring noise caused by the heavy landing of the circular surface. Automatic machine bees with laser weapons mounted beneath anti-gravity engines quickly pierced through the dust that had not yet settled and rushed into the interior of the Sanctum Sanctorum. Caw, caw, caw. Immediately after, a group of armored monster guards with lower bodies wriggling like snake bodies and metal skull heads on top, also waving chainswords that had not yet been activated, jumped out of the underground pit. Their extremely heavy metal bodies forcibly crushed the gorgeous patterned floor, making a series of continuous cracking sounds. Dong, dong, dong. After hundreds of automatic machine bees and dozens of armored monster guards quickly occupied the floor of the front hall and prepared to guard the surroundings. A massive Terminator armor with 4 metal limbs seemingly on its back slowly stepped into the Sanctum Sanctorum, treading on the metal stairs built by the bodies of the armored monster guards. At this moment, Luo Sha, wearing a rhombus helmet, saw through his visor. At a glance, he saw a dozen or so bloody and incomplete corpses lying not far away, as well as broken magical artifacts scattered all over the ground. This seemed to be the only combat traces left behind by the mages or apprentices of Kamar Taj. Divide 30 automatic machine bees for scanning and reconnaissance, don't let go of anything with vital signs, and kill all non-human monsters without exception. Luo Sha's deep voice came out through the rhombus helmet. As soon as he finished speaking, 1/3 of the automatic machine bees floating in the air immediately separated and quickly flew to other locations in the Sanctum Sanctorum. Afterwards, Luo Sha, driving the Terminator armor, slowly turned around. He stretched out his huge metal palm wearing a dark green power gauntlet towards the bottom of the circular pit and shook it gently. "David, the scene is temporarily safe, no traces of the enemy have been found yet, you can bring the king over," Luo Sha said in a calm tone. Soon after, Iron Man David, with blue light flashing in his eye sockets, entered the interior of the Sanctum Sanctorum, carrying the sweating Wong with his metal arms. At this moment, Wong, held under Iron Man David's arm, lifted his pale, fat face with effort. He first looked at the bloody and broken corpses with a sorrowful expression. Then, Wong stared at Luo Sha's huge back and said softly, "I'm sorry, Mr. Luo Sha, if my body wasn't still too weak to open the portal, it wouldn't be so complicated. Do you think there are any survivors who can survive in the sanctum? The possibility is very low, no matter what the purpose of your enemies is, they can't possibly leave any survivors." Wait. The automatic machine bee scanned a very weak life sign on the second floor. Luo Sha, wearing a rhombus helmet, suddenly raised his palm and waved it forcefully at Iron Man David and Wong, while listening to the report of the automatic machine bee from the communication device. He drove the Terminator armor without looking back and quickly ran towards a certain location on the second floor of the sanctum. Bang, bang, bang. In the next moment, more armored monster guards immediately jumped out of the circular pit, the dense number almost occupying all the ground in the front hall on the first floor. Some of them waved the chainswords in their mechanical tentacles and began to gradually explore the other directions inside the sanctum. Others firmly guarded Iron Man David and Wong and walked towards the second floor. 1 minute later, surrounded by automatic machine bees. From a corner intentionally hidden by piles of broken corpses, they forcefully dragged out a middle-aged man who was dying with weak breathing. Strange. Luo Sha, wearing a rhombus helmet, stared at the familiar pale face through the visor. He subconsciously asked, "Wong, why is this person in the Sanctum Sanctorum? He shouldn't be here, at least not now." Hearing Luo Sha's question, Wong, gently placed on the ground by Iron Man David, shook his head and smiled bitterly. He said in a heavy tone, "Just before the Sanctum Sanctorum was attacked, we had just encountered an undeserved disaster." Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, the sudden intense roar of the chainswords completely interrupted Wang's words. Immediately afterwards, an armored monster guard that was suddenly overturned by a huge force quickly passed the air. After smashing the ceiling of the first floor of the Sanctum Sanctorum, it heavily fell within the sight of everyone. In the next second, Luo Sha looked at the armored monster guard that was almost unscathed, and only rolled over its snake-like lower body, and shook its metal skull head and rushed back to the first floor. The deep voice without any emotional fluctuations slowly penetrated his rhombus helmet. "David, send this injured person back to the underground base for treatment. He can't die, the next thing is my job." "Yes, my lord." Iron Man David, with blue light flashing in his eye sockets, immediately bent down and picked up the unconscious Strange. At the same time, accompanied by a faint sound from a burst of electronic muscle bundles and servo devices, the Terminator armor driven by Luo Sha immediately moved its heavy steps towards the direction of the staircase platform. Chainsaw swords roared as the Aoi machine guards relentlessly swung them, cutting into the 5-meter-tall goat-head behemoths. Each of their attacks precisely struck the enormous bodies of the goat-head behemoths, forcibly embedding into their flesh, tearing off strips of black meat. However, the two goat-head behemoths seemed completely oblivious to any damage. They allowed the surrounding Aoi machine guards to tear at the black flesh on their massive bodies with the chainsaw swords in their mechanical tentacles. They simply swung their huge black claws tirelessly, like unfeeling machines, repeatedly sending the surrounding Aoi machine guards flying. At the same time, scorching red lasers sprayed out from the laser weapons of the auto machine bees. Incredibly precise shots continuously pierced the heads and massive bodies of the goat-head behemoths. Chi. Just then, the bodies of the two goat-head behemoths, which had slowed down as if on the verge of collapse, those completely melted and torn off pieces of black flesh, actually gradually turned into pools of viscous, pitch-black, strange liquid. They rapidly converged back onto their nearly shattered massive skeletons. In the blink of an eye, the two goat-head behemoths, completely restored to their original state, once again brandished their black claws and stood firmly within the encirclement of the Aoi machine guards and auto machine bees. Even more terrifying was that the black flesh on the massive bodies of the goat-head behemoths seemed impossible to be torn or embedded by the sharp teeth of the chainsaw swords. Even repeated bombardments of scorching lasers only caused the black flesh to slightly redden and heat up, but could no longer penetrate or melt it in the slightest. Rumble. At this moment, accompanied by a ground-shaking roar and fragments of the floor splashing everywhere, Roxia, piloting the towering Terminator armor, heavily crashed back down to the first floor. Through his visor, he stared at the goat-head behemoths within the encirclement of the Aoi machine guards, and began to ponder the goat-head behemoths that had developed dual immunity to both physical and energy attacks. The more methods of attack, the longer the time, the more disadvantageous it is for us. Roxia muttered to himself, "Ka," accompanied by a series of subtle sounds of mechanical joints rotating. A thick servo-mechanical arm located behind the power backpack instantly responded to Roxia's control. Swish swish swish. Extremely terrifying green beams, like arrows leaving the bow, rapidly shot out from the depths of the Gauss blaster's muzzle. After streaking across the air, they forcibly bombarded the massive bodies of the goat-head behemoths. Chi. At this moment, the black flesh of the goat-head behemoths, which had developed strong resistance to chainsaw swords and laser weapons, was almost instantly and easily penetrated by the green beams. Their massive bodies didn't even have time to adapt to this new form of attack. Particles of green atoms began to rapidly dissipate into the air. Swish swish swish. Seeing the Gauss blaster achieve amazing results once again, Roxia immediately controlled the servo-mechanical arm to pull the blaster's trigger all the way down. Streams of dazzling green light, like a celestial maiden scattering flowers, completely enveloped the massive bodies of the two goat-head behemoths. After a short moment, the 5-meter-tall massive bodies of the two goat-head behemoths were reduced to only 4 huge, hoof-like legs crashing heavily to the ground. The rest of their bodies turned into particles of constantly dissipating green atoms, completely vanishing into the air. Subsequently, even the remaining giant legs were torn into countless wreckage fragments by the Aoi machine guards' incessantly swinging chainsaw swords, evenly scattered across the surrounding floor. Ka. Roxia, piloting the Terminator armor, retracted the servo-mechanical arm controlling the Gauss blaster. He slightly shook his huge hand wearing a dark green power gauntlet, and was just about to step forward to investigate, when Wang's anxious voice transmitted to his ears from above. Mr. Roxia, these goat-head monsters are black magic summons of that white-haired old man. He didn't choose to escape immediately, so the other party's goal must be the magic node hidden deep in the underground space of the Sanctum Sanctorum. Once that place is destroyed, the magic defense system covering the entire Earth will have huge flaws and loopholes. Hearing Wang's series of words, Roxia, wearing a rhombus helmet, quickly directed the Aoi machine guards and auto machine bees of the Intelligent Control Legion to explore the path ahead, striving to find the location where the goat-head behemoths had just appeared. At the same time, he also looked up at Wang, who was running down, and Iron Man David, who was still holding Strange in his metal arms. Roxia asked Wang to point out the path to the magic node of the Sanctum Sanctorum. At the same time, he also asked Iron Man David to bring back the blood scythe and super phase sword, which he had forgotten to bring due to the urgency of the situation, after sending the injured back. In the next moment, Iron Man David, holding Strange, entered the circular pit. Roxia then piloted the Terminator armor and walked to the front of Wang. Soon after, the two of them, under the escort of a large number of Aoi machine guards and auto machine bees, quickly entered the depths of the Sanctum Sanctorum's underground, arriving at a long corridor where the surrounding space seemed to be constantly changing and rotating. The pale-faced Wang also immediately saw the tragic remains of Guardian Mage Daniel. But he didn't have time to express sadness. He could only grit his teeth and use complex gestures to gradually condense out one after another magic rune emitting orange light. And as more magic runes appeared, the surrounding constantly changing space seemed to become even more active. Even the positions of the walls and ceilings began to repeatedly rotate and twist. It wasn't until several tens of seconds later, when a faint underground passage reappeared in front of the two of them, that he stopped casting spells. At this moment, Wang, whose forehead was covered in a lot of sweat, let out a breath of relief. He said to Roxia with a wry smile, "These powerful spells and protective magic were originally used to protect the magic node and defend against enemies, but now it seems that they haven't played much of a role. Perhaps that demon shadow follower calling himself Faust is far more powerful than we imagined." Faust? Is it an old man wearing a monocle and a white suit? Roxia, wearing a rhombus helmet, suddenly turned his gaze. He looked down at Wang beside him and asked softly, Could it be that Mr. Roxia, you have heard of his name? Or have you also met him? Wang seemed slightly stunned. He couldn't help but look towards Roxia's visor. However, Roxia simply shook his rhombus helmet and said in a low voice, "I've had a brief encounter." Just then, before Roxia could finish speaking, the 4 servo-mechanical arms located behind the Terminator armor's power backpack were immediately turned around by him. In an instant, streams of green light and searing heat carrying extreme temperatures, along with the roar of the explosive rounds and the scorching red lasers, continuously poured out a terrifying storm of firepower towards a corner not far away. Tisk, young people's tempers are just so irritable, a familiar little wolf cub. Thank you all for your support. Boom boom boom. Controlling the servo-mechanical arm, Rorschach continued to unleash terrifying firepower without hesitation. In an instant, a large number of explosive bullets, red lasers, and even thermal melts and green beams completely enveloped the dark corners at the other end of the corridor. However, any attack approaching Faust within a radius of 10 meters would be heavily bound by an invisible space as viscous as glue. After gradually stagnating in midair, only spatial ripples radiating outward remained. Little wolf cub, I didn't expect the little mouse's reinforcements to be you. This old man is indeed getting old, and his eyesight is getting worse, but the black magic I've studied for so many years hasn't been in vain. At this moment, Faust, wearing a monocle on his face, smiled as he scanned the towering Terminator armor and Wang's suddenly changing face. Immediately afterward, one of his palms always held the gentleman's cane that kept emitting black brilliance. The other palm also quickly transformed into several complex spell gestures. Chi chi chi. In the next second, as circles of black rune arrays burst forth from his feet. 9 black monsters of varying sizes, the largest comparable to a goat-headed behemoth, the smallest only the size of an ordinary child, and even with different appearances, were summoned by Faust one by one. Immediately afterward, these menacing black monsters wanted to launch an attack and charge towards Rorschach. This is one of the 72 Dark Apostles of Chthon? You are not an ordinary Dark Dimension cultist. You are its agent in the mortal realm. At this moment, Wang, who quickly recognized the black monsters, widened his eyes. While struggling to raise his palm to prepare to cast a counter spell, he hurriedly shouted to Rorschach. Mr. Rorschach, he is not like us mages who need to rely on external forces to cast spells. The dark dimension he believes in will provide him with a constant stream of black magic power. We cannot give him a chance to continue summoning more dark apostles. With each dark apostle that exists, the power of his black magic will increase by several points. Hearing Wang's words, Rorschach, wearing a metal helmet, did not say anything. He simply took advantage of the gap when controlling the servo-mechanical arm to stop shooting, and suddenly raised a palm and waved it forward. And those automaton bees and crustacean guard mechs surrounding the 2 people immediately rushed towards the 9 black apostles, and firmly surrounded and trapped any of their movements. Even if crustacean guard mechs wielding chainsaw swords were knocked away by brute force, or heavily entangled by strange shadows. However, the metal components were basically undamaged, and the intelligent control legion still stubbornly carried out Rock's orders, constantly using metal and scorching lasers to hold back the Black Apostle's advance. Immediately afterward, Rorschach gently tapped the diamond-shaped helmet with his metal palm, making a crisp metallic clanging sound. A summoner, huh? Playing with spatial magic, huh? Dark Apostles, huh? This just means my firepower isn't strong enough. As soon as Rock's voice fell, in the first-floor lobby, further away from everyone, a series of roaring noises suddenly sounded from the depths of the circular pit, and countless dust was overturned once again. Dong dong dong, accompanied by a series of heavy footsteps rapidly approaching from afar. 3 Fortress Star intelligent control mechs, each the size of a Terminator armor, actually carried Hellhammer-type laser cannons and squeezed into the long corridor where the surrounding space was ceasing to transform. In the next second, the 3 thick muzzles were firmly aimed at Faust's position, and launched an incomparably astonishing laser cannon bombardment indoors without hesitation. Chi chi chi. In an instant, 3 thick scarlet beams of light, like jets of scorching lava, forcibly streaked over Rorschach and Wang's heads, and quickly bombarded towards Faust. At this moment, the 9 black apostles of varying sizes were also firmly bound in place by the serpentine bodies and mechanical tentacles of the crustacean guard mechs, making it impossible for them to break free and move for a while. Subsequently, the struggling black apostles and some fearless crustacean guard mechs were completely evaporated and vaporized by the extremely terrifying scarlet beams, leaving only the remains of their lower bodies to fall to the ground. However, this was far from the end for the scarlet beams. At the same time, at the center of the stagnant space, shadows of the dark dimension, Faust, whose palm seemed to be brewing an even stronger spell, suddenly changed his face. He hurriedly interrupted the gestures of casting the spell. A series of pitch-black shadows that quickly spread from his feet to his whole body completely enveloped his tall figure, taking him to a position further away. However, the power and rate of fire of the Hellhammer-type laser cannon in the narrow space far exceeded Faust's estimate and imagination. The 3 scarlet beams that forcibly penetrated the stagnant space even detonated the explosive bullets and tumbling thermal melts that were constantly rippling with spatial ripples. At this moment, the invisible stagnant space seemed to have disappeared. Even the green beams quickly penetrated the entire stagnant space. One of the green beams even streaked across the pitch-black shadow wrapped around Faust. Rumble, rumble. In an instant, the entire structure of the Sanctum Sanctorum seemed to shake violently. And accompanied by a series of incomparably dazzling explosive flames and continuous violent impacts. Even Rorschach, wearing Terminator armor, had to bend slightly and raise a metal arm to block the continuous ravages of the shockwave. Chi. Almost at the same time, heavy scorching mist erupted from the metal bodies of the Fortress Star intelligent control mechs. The Hellhammer-type laser cannon, having completed its recharge once again, fired terrifying scarlet beams once again with its thick barrel not yet fully cooled. Boom, boom, boom. At this moment, Wong, who was plump and in an extremely disheveled state, was lying behind the Terminator armor, desperately dodging the shock wave of the explosion, and suddenly widened his eyes. Even his mouth subconsciously let out a cry full of horror. Ah! In a flash of lightning, Wong quickly changed the spell gestures in his 2 palms. Before the scarlet beams hit the target position, he rapidly expanded the space of the entire long corridor countless times, instantly turning it into a large square with more spacious space. In an instant, the exploding energy light and the intense shock wave once again dissipated towards the surroundings, but completely lost their terrifying impact due to the sudden change in space. Caw caw caw. Accompanied by countless subtle sounds of electronic muscle fibers and servo devices. Rorschach slowly lowered the dark green power gauntlet blocking in front of the diamond-shaped helmet. He ignored the faint complaints from the ancient machine spirit. His 2 heavy magnetic boots suddenly stepped forward and quickly launched a charge towards Faust's location. Dong dong dong. However, by the time Luo Sha, piloting the Terminator armor, swiftly arrived at the epicenter of the explosion, and the automaton drones and Axgard machine servants rapidly converged, he saw through his helmet's visor that Faust, the white-haired old man, was slowly dissolving into green atoms from the waist down. Cough, cough. This is a pretty big mess, wouldn't you say, little wolf cub? At this moment, Faust, whose monocle was long gone, seemed to have aged considerably. He continuously coughed up black, viscous, foul-smelling blood. Strands of black blood also flowed along the corners of his mouth onto his scarred and sturdy chest, producing a sizzling sound of corrosion. At a glance, even the white suit he wore had been mostly burned away by the explosive flames and scorching heat. Occasionally, wisps of rising green smoke and specks of sparks would appear. Luo Sha, wearing the rhombus helmet, didn't say a word. He simply activated the Terminator armor, slowly deploying its 4 servo-mechanical arms, and strode forward. At the same time, the power gauntlet on his right hand seemed to rapidly manifest a layer of azure energy field on its dark green shell. Young man, I have no grievances with you. I am just a pitiful follower of black magic. Would you like to know what the Great Shadow foretold to me? Listen to me. The Great Shadow seems to have foreseen the drastic changes that will occur on Earth. It wants to get a piece of the pie and gain more power. My purpose isn't just to destroy the Sanctum Sanctorum's magical node, but to inject a large amount of black magic power to taint the entire magical node into a bright beacon guiding the Great Shadow's return. Just then, Luo Sha, piloting the Terminator armor, arrived in front of Faust, who was talking non-stop revealing more information. His cold gaze seemed to pierce through the helmet's visor, looking down at the white-haired old man whose aged smile had stiffened considerably, still without uttering a word. At this moment, the massive figure of the 6-armed Terminator armor slowly enveloped Faust below. Child, I noticed that you know almost nothing about black magic. If you need a magical consultant, I am willing to draft a 1,000-year contract, even with the Ancient One as a witness. I can serve you. Moreover, in my castle in Europe, there is also sealed the infiltration source belonging to the Great Shadow, the ultimate compendium of black mages, the Darkhold. I can hand it over to the Ancient One. No, I can give it to you too. At this moment, perhaps the intense stimulation from the azure energy field constantly emitting subtle buzzing sounds on the dark green power gauntlet. Even Faust, who knew nothing about technological weapons, completely panicked. He gritted his teeth, enduring the endless pain of his lower body continuously dissolving. He began to angrily berate the silent Luo Sha, blurting out whatever came to mind. Little brat. The Great Shadow is an ancient demon god who has long since ascended. The source of black magic power. You cannot. Bang! However, before Faust could finish his final words, Luo Sha suddenly swung the buzzing power gauntlet, blasting Faust's entire head with just one punch. Splurt! Large amounts of hot brain matter mixed with black blood splattered onto Luo Sha's Terminator armor, faintly corroding small pits between the ceramic steel outer shell. At the same time, with the thunderous explosion of Faust's head, the speed at which his incomplete body gradually dissolved into green atoms, as if it had lost its vitality or the protection of black magic, greatly accelerated. Soon after, Faust, who had completely turned to ashes, left only a gentleman's cane broken in half on the floor. So much nonsense even when facing death. Luo Sha muttered to himself, slightly shaking his rhombus helmet. Then, he turned his head to look at Wang, who was pale and panting heavily. His low voice once again transmitted from the rhombus helmet, echoing around. Wang, did you hear what Faust just said? After your magical nodes are tainted by black magic, can they still be salvaged? Hearing Luo Sha's question, Wang took a deep breath and wiped the beads of sweat gradually seeping from his forehead. He frowned and pondered for a moment, then nodded heavily and said, if we re-inject a large amount of white magic power, we should be able to save it. But the beacon attracting the Great Shadow has already been sent out, so I fear. However, Wang's words were abruptly interrupted by a waving metal palm. Luo Sha slightly rotated the view of his visor. He swept his gaze around at the machine soldier wreckage scattered all over the ground and the remains of those dark apostles that were slowly disappearing. He said to Wang in a calm tone, even if the sky falls, there will be someone taller to hold it up. Currently, the Ancient One is still here, and the Asgardian god King Odin has not yet died. Even if the Great Shadow comes, it won't have a good outcome. However, to be on the safe side, we also need to make defensive preparations in advance. After all, the aftermath of these inhuman things fighting each other could easily destroy the Earth. Luo Sha's words seemed to have received Wang's affirmation. At this moment, Wang's anxious state of mind seemed to have calmed down a lot. He gasped heavily for a while. He quickly took out the sling ring from his body and began to cast a portal that sparked with fire. When Wang quickly stepped into the interior of the portal to go to Kamar Taj to gather reinforcements, Luo Sha also began to direct the Axe Guard machine servants to clean up the mechanical wreckage scattered all over the ground and tidy up the entire battlefield. Just then, Faust's broken gentleman's cane was gently picked up by an Axe Guard machine servant with a mechanical tentacle. It was slowly sent to Luo Sha's front. Luo Sha, wearing the rhombus helmet, originally didn't intend to pick up this damaged magical artifact related to black magic. After all, the experience of obtaining phantasm dust once was already enough. No one knew what kind of disaster was hidden in alien or heretical things. However, at this time, Luo Sha, vaguely remembering something, subconsciously opened the simulator's page and aimed it at the gentleman's cane that had been broken into 2 pieces. Immediately afterward, a crisp prompt from the simulator made him couldn't help but let out a surprised sound. Open black lens bracket harmful substance detected. Magic, witchcraft, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket current holding quantity is 1, available resource time is 100 hours, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket extract, close black lens bracket. Luo Sha, hidden inside the rhombus helmet, slightly raised his eyebrows. He unhesitatingly extracted and absorbed the gentleman's cane that had been broken into 2 pieces. Open black lens bracket extracted harmful substance. Magic, witchcraft, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket obtained resource time, 100 hours close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket currently discovered harmful substances, firearms, genes, cold weapons, magic, witchcraft, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket there is only one last harmful substance left before the new simulator function is activated, please keep up the good work, close black lens bracket. Tisk, there's even an unexpected harvest. After the gentleman's cane disappeared out of thin air from the Axe Guard machine servant's mechanical tentacle, Luo Sha muttered to himself as he casually closed the simulator's page. Luo Sha's mood was considerably lightened by the unexpected surprise. He slowly activated his Terminator armor, pacing back and forth as he waited for the others to arrive. The speed at which Kamar Taj's reinforcements arrived was far faster than he had imagined. Near the portal that Wang had left behind when he departed, one sparking portal after another rapidly materialized in the air. Immediately following, dozens of solemn-looking formal sorcerers filed in one after another. They appeared within Luo Sha's field of vision. However, when these hastily arrived sorcerers immediately saw the massive, hulking six-armed Terminator, as well as the crab monster machine guards and automaton beasts scattered all around, they clearly misunderstood something, and expressions of shock appeared on their faces. Subsequently, close combat magical weapons stained with fresh blood and magical shields of the rings of Ragador were quickly raised in front of them. Everyone, lower your weapons and spells. This is our honored guest from Kamar Taj, and he is the one who helped us defend the New York Sanctum. What are you all standing there for? Hurry up and repair the magical nodes contaminated by dark magic. Just then, Mordo, who had just stepped out of the portal, immediately reprimanded the surrounding people with his expressionless, dark face. Then, he, wearing a dark green sorcerer's robe, gathered his sleeves and quickened his pace to arrive in front of Luo Sha. With a serious expression, Mordo bowed without hesitation to the massive six-armed Terminator armor. Mr. Luo Sha, Wang has already informed us of what happened here. As the senior disciple of Kamar Taj, I thank you for your generous assistance on behalf of the Ancient One. After the teacher returns, she will definitely offer you appropriate compensation. Let's skip the pleasantries. Last time, I didn't even receive a single hair. Mordo, have you just finished a battle? Luo Sha, wearing a rhombus-shaped helmet, accurately noticed the several fresh tears and dark red bloodstains on Mordo's sorcerer's robe through the visor. He slightly shifted his gaze again, looking at the battle-damaged magical weapons carried by the sorcerers who were running towards the magical nodes. A low, questioning voice slowly transmitted from the helmet. Upon hearing Luo Sha's question, a fleeting wry smile seemed to appear on Mordo's dark-skinned face. He took a deep breath and said in as calm a tone as possible. The Hong Kong Sanctum was besieged by a terrifying tide of corpses caused by a supernatural creature called Iron Corpse. Fortunately, the Shield of Asia sent several elite teams to cooperate and help us eliminate this disaster. And the London Sanctum, thanks to the local guardian sorcerer Constantine's keenness and vigilance, preemptively captured a group of dark magic puppets who wanted to sneak into the sanctum to carry out sabotage. However, the manipulator hiding behind the scenes did not leave any traces and disappeared after the infiltration failed. From this, it can be seen that these things are all interconnected, and the only goal should be the magical nodes of the Supreme Sanctum. This time, if you hadn't helped the New York Sanctum, which suffered heavy losses in sorcerer personnel, the magical defense system enveloping the Earth might have had even bigger problems, instead of just being contaminated by dark magic as it is now. As soon as Mordo finished speaking, Luo Sha, wearing a rhombus-shaped helmet, fell silent for a moment. Through the visor, he looked down at Mordo and continued to ask. Your enemies have already launched attacks, so where is the Ancient One? Facing such a major event, which may even endanger the entire world, she should know about it, right? Also, where is she? However, at this moment, a hint of hesitation seemed to appear between Mordo's dark eyebrows. But in the end, after taking a deep breath, he still told Luo Sha the truth. Mr. Luo Sha, this is the crux of the whole problem. The backbone of Kamar Taj, the ancient supreme sorcerer, the Ancient One, is now missing. This situation is not common. At least, since I followed the teacher to learn the way of the sorcerer, I have basically never seen it happen more than a few times. Faced with Mordo's words, Luo Sha activated the Terminator armor to slightly lower himself. The subtle humming from the electronic muscle bundles and servo devices reverberated around. And his gaze, through the visor, stared straight at Mordo's dark face as he asked. Then, what about Kamar Taj's many contingency plans and programs for such events? Don't tell me that you are completely unprepared for this, and that you only study magical knowledge and combat training on weekdays. Kamar Taj's most important duty is to guard the three sanctums and prevent the magical nodes from being destroyed by evildoers. In addition to the sorcerers responsible for guarding them, we have also prepared several combat teams to deal with various sudden supernatural events. But in recent years, every time we encounter a supernatural event, the sorcerers in the combat team suffer very heavy casualties, and the training of apprentices is very slow. After all, knowledge of spells and incantations is not a simple thing that can be learned overnight. Therefore, the number of sorcerers in Kamar Taj has never been able to increase. And in the past, when faced with things that exceeded our capabilities, the Ancient One would usually personally take action to solve them. The Supreme Sorcerer's illustrious reputation was not built up by age and fame, but was earned through battles. Of course, when I was younger, I also raised similar concerns to the teacher, but the teacher always told me that fate has its own arrangements, and so does Kamar Taj. Mr. Luo Shah, if you want to ask us how we should deal with this matter, then my suggestion is that I hope Master Ji Yuyi can return as soon as possible. It seemed that Luo Shah's questioning had aroused Mordo's desire to complain. He unexpectedly changed his usual rigid and serious attitude. He began to tell Luo Shah the truth. After listening to Mordo's series of words, Luo Shah suddenly sighed inside the rhombus helmet. He murmured in a low voice, "A bunch of trash, no wonder Ji Yuyi is tired." Immediately afterwards, Luo Shah drove the Terminator armor and stepped forward. He lowered his head slightly, looked down at Mordo, who was close at hand, and said lightly, "Mordo, before Master Ji Yuyi returns, I want to take over the command of your Kama-Taj." Quote, "As the chief disciple of Kama-Taj, do you have any objections to this?" Quote, This. At this moment, Mordo, who heard Luo Shah's words, was slightly stunned. His brows furrowed subconsciously, and his eyes were also full of struggle and hesitation. However, when his gaze inadvertently swept over Luo Shah's power gauntlet, which he had clenched at some point, and the occasional metal collision sounds from the Aogi machine guards and the automatic machine bees around him, Mordo suddenly took a deep breath. His eyes instantly became firm, and he stared solemnly at Luo Shah's goggles, gritting his teeth and saying, "Mr. Luo Shah, in an emergency, I am willing to take all responsibility for this." Quote, "Moreover, I think Kama-Taj, which has not changed for thousands of years, should also make some changes." Quote, "Very good, a wise choice." Luo Shah, wearing a rhombus helmet, nodded slightly. He slowly released the power gauntlet he had clenched into a fist, and then raised his other metal palm covered with ceramic steel shell. He gently patted Mordo's muscular and broad shoulders. Dash 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 dash. Looking down from the cold void, a life planet with a blue appearance is slowly rotating. This is the only home of native humans, Earth. At this moment, Master Ji Yuyi, who was sitting cross-legged in the cold void, slowly opened her closed eyes. Strands of bright energy seemed to flash from her deep pupils. Immediately afterwards, a smile seemed to appear on the corner of her mouth. Immediately afterwards, Master Ji Yuyi suddenly said lightly to a phantom figure standing not far away, "My older disciple, his failed destiny has completely changed, and he even has the initial qualifications to compete for the title of Supreme Mage. Perhaps in the past, I took on too many things, which also completely deprived them of the opportunity to grow. Buzz buzz buzz, the fate of mankind must be in its own hands. This is an iron law that all things in the universe cannot change, buzz buzz buzz." At this moment, the noisy sound emitted by the phantom figure wearing golden power armor seemed to be much clearer and more coherent. At a glance, even his huge power claw seemed much more real. Buzz buzz buzz, therefore, many times, the human species needs to face pressure in order to continue to grow, buzz buzz buzz. Asgard above, can you please stop telling me these vague truths? I just want to know when that damn Sidorak will descend. Quote. At this moment, another old voice suddenly interrupted the conversation between Ji Yuyi and the phantom figure. In the next moment, Odin, the God King, holding Gingnir in his thick-fingered hand, slightly widened his only remaining eye. He stared at Ji Yuyi's bald head, and asked with an unkind tone, "Ji Yuyi, are you sure Sidorak will fall for this trick? Also, are you sure its energy source can extend my already short lifespan?" Quote. Ji Yuyi, who always had a smile on the corner of her mouth, raised her eyebrows slightly. She said without turning her head, "Maybe it will work, maybe it won't succeed at all, but if you don't try, you will never know the result. Moreover, everything is proceeding according to plan. Our new friend has used his special power called psionic energy to infiltrate some of Sidorak's devout believers, gradually guide them into attacking the Sanctum Sanctorum, and send out a bright beacon belonging to black magic. And according to my understanding, returning to the mortal world of Earth is what Sidorak, who was expelled by Agamotto, has been thinking about day and night, and it has almost become its most crazy obsession. Ha, Odin, look, it's here. Quote, as soon as Gyuyi finished speaking. In the bright starry sky 100 light-years away from here. A dark magic shadow that seemed to cover countless stars is slowly wriggling its invisible and huge body and rushing towards the earth at high speed. In an instant, the solemn-looking god King Odin subconsciously clenched the unerring spear Gungnir in his palm. Master Gyuyi, with a smile on her face, shook her slender fingers a few times. The eye of Agamotto hanging in front of her chest was quickly opened, emitting a crystal clear and bright green light outwards. Even the phantom figure wearing golden power armor slowly raised its incomparably huge power claw. In the next second, a power sword burning with golden flames also slowly appeared in his palm. Luo Sha didn't want to occupy Kamar Taj. At least not while the Ancient One was still alive. He wouldn't have chosen to do so. But a conversation with Mordo made him unexpectedly aware of the current state of Earth. It was so vulnerable to ancient beings like dimensional demon gods. Even the so-called magical defense system consisted of only 3 sanctums that could be easily breached. The guardian mages were not only lacking in quality but also in quantity. Even if it was because native magic followed the law of equivalent exchange. Resulting in the greater the power of the spell, the greater the cost to cast it. However, the Kamar Taj mages who specialized in close combat seemed to have never considered that since the beginning of the Industrial Age, firearms have been the most convenient lethal weapons on Earth. Why hasn't anyone crafted magical artifacts into firearms or even more lethal weapons? And facing Luo Sha's small question, Mordo seemed to be dumbfounded. But then, he frowned slightly and began to ponder. Yes, why is that? Could it be because physical damage is almost ineffective against supernatural creatures? But only those very powerful, or naturally so, supernatural creatures are immune to physical damage. There are still quite a few supernatural creatures that can be completely eliminated with just melee weapons. Even for those supernatural monsters that can only be harmed by magical artifacts and spells. Wouldn't it be better if we directly turned firearms and bullets into magical artifacts? Even if the cost of manufacturing magical artifacts is still much higher. It would still be more cost-effective than casting spells in the long run, right? At this moment, Mordo's eyes gradually brightened. He seemed to have opened the door to a new world. And Luo Sha naturally knew nothing about this. He simply contacted Tony Stark through the communication device, asking him to send over a batch of carapace armor and laser weapons, heavy lumber guns, and some ammunition. Afterward, Luo Sha pondered slightly. He ordered Tony Stark to direct more automatic servo robots to pack and organize the base's supplies and equipment. And begin the relocation plan overseas in advance. If the Great Shadow Demon really descends and invades at that time, and local powerhouses like the Ancient One are unable to show up and stop it, then, Luo Sha will have Redidus lift the restrictions and create an endless army of mind-controlled soldiers. To buy time for humanity's future. Until he becomes powerful enough using the simulator, or obtains a trump card capable of killing gods. Of course, all of this is the worst-case scenario. Luo Sha also doesn't want things to develop to such a point. He will do his utmost with his current strength. So, for the next period of time. Apart from the guardian mages still stationed at the other 2 sanctums. The Kamar Taj mages and apprentices, numbering only 200 or so, all gathered at the New York sanctum. Luo Sha equipped everyone with carapace armor and laser weapons. At the same time, he also took out heavy lumber guns and some ordinary firearms. Luo Sha's only requirement for them was to first learn to obey orders on the battlefield and familiarize themselves with the weapons and equipment. Then, let these formal mages, like assembly line workers, begin casting spells to sublimate ordinary items into magical artifacts on the firearms and weapons. Because there wasn't enough time to manufacture new magical firearm artifacts. Therefore, Mordo and Wong searched through the Ancient One's library and found a black magic that could be said to be completely opportunistic. The price was that the weapons and equipment sublimated into magical artifacts could only last for a short period of time before they would be completely damaged and disappear. However, for Luo Sha, this was just a means of making the most of everything. And he could afford to waste it completely. About 24 hours later, more than 200 mages and apprentices, relying on their physical qualities far exceeding ordinary people, completely familiarized themselves with obeying orders on the battlefield. 48 hours later, the first batch of firearm artifacts that could last for about half a month was successfully produced. However, 72 hours later, the Ancient One, with the Eye of Agamotto hanging on her chest, suddenly appeared in front of everyone with a smile. She announced a very important piece of news to Luo Sha and the others. That was that the great shadow demon Chthon, if no miracle occurs, then it basically won't descend again. Dash 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 dash. Facing Luo Sha's behavior of taking over as the leader of Kamar Taj without authorization, the Ancient One not only didn't have any resentment, but instead hinted to Luo Sha in her words, asking him if he was interested in becoming the Sorcerer Supreme. Luo Sha naturally had no interest in this, especially after he knew how weak and pathetic the local mages were. Even the only curiosity he had was extinguished. In fact, the next Sorcerer Supreme is still locked up in his underground base. Only when the Ancient One personally promised to give him equivalent rewards did Luo Sha, with an indifferent expression, immediately drive the Terminator armor and lead the mind-controlled army back to the underground base. The current underground base seemed much emptier. At least the automatic servo robots that used to come and go incessantly had joined the base's relocation plan, and basically no longer appeared on the first floor of the base. The first person Luo Sha encountered was Jessica, who was wearing a set of Battle Sister power armor. Even though the power armor was not light, Jessica could still float and dance in midair with her superpowers. At this moment, Jessica, beaming with joy, expressed her gratitude to Luo Sha. Luo Sha didn't say much, just encouraged Jessica a few words. At the same time, he also asked Jessica to continue leading the gang dogs to guard the underground base until the entire base relocation plan was completed. Immediately afterward, Luo Sha casually summoned a team of Leviathan machine guards who had not yet left, and had them help him remove the Terminator armor. Soon after, Luo Sha, having completed a large meal, returned to the resting room. He slowly closed his eyelids, which had not been closed for several days, and entered a state of sleep. It is not known how much time has passed. Luo Sha, who was in a state of slumber, suddenly woke up. He first blinked his eyes, and then lay on the cold metal bed for a while. Then the whole person slowly sat up. I remember that I haven't had a dream for a long time. Why did I suddenly have such a realistic dream? Luo Sha narrowed his eyes slightly. He muttered to himself. That seemed to be an incredibly realistic dream. Three powerful light shadows with completely different energy colors were fighting side by side. They repeatedly charged at a dark magic shadow that was so large that it had to be calculated in light years. Until the opponent's almost boundless power gradually weakened, and there was no longer any means of resistance. The three, who had completely torn apart the dark magic shadow's huge body, actually began to devour the surging energy scattered by the opponent. And the whole strange dream seemed to end there. At this moment, Luo Sha, sitting cross-legged on the metal bed, couldn't figure it out. In the end, vaguely guessing something, he just slowly let out a sigh. Luo Sha lay back on the metal bed again, intending to continue sleeping for a while. But then, with no sleepiness, he chose to turn on the simulator. The water in the native universe is also deep. Maybe the more you know, the smaller your courage will be. I should still steadily carry out my simulation. This time it should be an item simulation. I hope the Emperor protects me. Simulation starting. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Current possessed identity. Space Wolf Blood Clot Webway Comorig Death Arena. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Please select a landing identity. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. If refused, a random landing will occur. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Identity selection refused. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Simulation starting. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You have landed in the Warhammer universe. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Time, M41. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Location, Galaxy Vidar subsector Valfar system. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You have landed in the court chamber of a battle barge named Storm. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You stand inside the bridge, a dimly lit room filled with navigational cogitators and pale green screens. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Around you, countless mortal crew members wearing communication headsets and navigators guiding the course sit before rows of screens, constantly emitting the subtle sounds of manipulating unknown machinery. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You can't help but blink and exhale a breath of air from your nostrils. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You have not yet figured out your identity, status, or where exactly you are. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Are you listening? Chapter Master Amrad. Just then, you suddenly hear a doubtful, raspy female voice beside you. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You immediately turn your head to look. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You immediately see a middle-aged woman wearing the uniform of an Imperial Navy Vice Admiral. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The skin on her face is tan, her hair is short and neat, and her right arm has been replaced with a mechanical prosthetic. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. This further accentuates her sharp, heroic spirit and erudite competence, qualities belonging to a high-ranking Imperial Navy officer. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Captain Gretus. Please continue your previous topic. You subconsciously blurt out her name and title. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Immediately afterwards, a small portion of quite unfamiliar memories rapidly flash through the depths of your mind. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. All right, Chapter Master Amrad, however, you seem to be daydreaming just now. Then I'll repeat my previous report. Captain Gretus, her expression solemn, slightly twitches the corner of her mouth and takes a deep breath as she says to you. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Without any sense of embarrassment, you force out a fleeting smile. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You lower your head slightly and gaze at her. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. At this moment, the female captain's report, combined with the small portion of memories you just obtained, gradually makes you understand the current situation. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. This is the flagship of the Astral Knights chapter, the battle barge, Storm. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You are now the current chapter master of the Astral Knights chapter. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Currently, the entire fleet belonging to the Astral Knights is crossing the Vidar subsector, about to arrive at the Valfar system. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. At the same time, a vast Valfar relief fleet, jointly composed of combat personnel drawn from 15 chapters, including the Ultramarines, the Invaders, the Blood Angels, and the Aurora chapter, is gradually converging there. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. And your only combat mission, or rather, goal. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket is to try your best to stop the Necron's planet-killing weapon battleship, the World Engine, from continuing to ravage the territory of the human Imperium. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Before your arrival, 2 important agricultural planets have already been completely destroyed by the World Engine's terrifying weapons, completely turning into death worlds with no hope of restoration. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You quietly listen to the female captain's report. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You don't say much, only frowning as you instruct her. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Once the fleet arrives at the rendezvous point in the Valfar system, notify you immediately. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You activate the power armor, mainly iron gray in color, supplemented with blue spray paint as a color scheme, and walk out of the bridge. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. 3 veteran squads who are quietly waiting for you immediately step forward and salute. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. They are all part of the honor guard responsible for protecting the chapter master's, safety. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Deep in thought, you raise your hand to refuse their continued following and walk alone towards the metal corridor ahead. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Before long, you, who are quite unfamiliar with the layout of the ship's interior, stop at a T-junction in the metal corridor. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Respected chapter master, where do you wish to go? Just then, you hear another detached female voice filled with mechanical sounds beside you. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You scan your surroundings with a blank expression, but apart from the cold light emanating from the overhead lights in the metal corridor, you don't see any figure. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Chapter master, I am the machine spirit of the battle barge, Storm. If you wish, you can call me Cortana. May I ask where you need to go now? Do you require my assistance? Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The shipboard machine spirit named Cortana once again asks you in a detached, mechanical tone. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You can't help but raise an eyebrow and suddenly look down. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Your gaze inadvertently falls on the metal helmet hanging at your waist. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Clearly, her voice is being transmitted from inside the communication device. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. When did the Imperium get so many machine spirits? Cortana, is it? Help me notify all the Astartes within the chapter, and have them gather in the ship's large training ground. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You pause slightly, then suddenly issue an order to the shipboard machine spirit. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Very well, chapter master. Connecting to the fleet master, 4th Company Captain Shekis, and the other company captains, please enter the corridor on the right first, as it leads directly to the large training ground on the mid-level deck. The shipboard machine spirit Cortana responds quickly to your order. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You nod in acknowledgement with a blank expression. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You continue to activate your power armor and enter the interior of the metal corridor, which is still dimly lit. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You gradually delve deeper into a series of winding metal corridors, also passing by a number of servitors responsible for maintaining the ship. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. By the time you arrive at the large training ground, a total of 803 Astartes have completed their full assembly. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You see the fleet master, 4th Company Captain Shekis, who has 12 service studs above his forehead, as well as the other captains of the several great companies. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. They, along with the chief chaplain and the chief librarian, quickly turn around and step forward, raising their hands in salute in your direction. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Chapter master. The crowd shouts at you in voices of varying pitch. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. At this moment, as the tall figures of the various commanders move over and their voices ring out. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The Astartes, who had originally been emitting some noise, immediately enter a state of silence. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Almost simultaneously, they raise a strong arm covered in ceramite, heavily colliding it against the chest plate of their iron-gray power armor, emitting a series of muffled thuds. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Chapter master. Everyone once again sends you a loud greeting in a uniform voice. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You narrow your eyes slightly and exhale a breath of air forcefully. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You slowly nod in acknowledgement to the crowd before you. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Battle brothers of the Astral Knights, everyone should already understand the basic situation of this campaign, right? You slowly step forward and open your mouth to speak in a calm tone. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. If anyone still isn't clear, then I'll repeat it again. A planet-killing weapon battleship of those boneheads who are sleeping soundly, that is, the Necrons, has attacked Imperial territory, and 2 agricultural planets have been destroyed into death worlds. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. If we allow them to continue to ravage the territory, not only will the entire system face the crisis of annihilation, but even the center of the Imperium, the Sol system, will suffer a great disaster. Because according to the Imperial prediction of the navigation route, its ultimate goal is very likely to be Mars, the important planet of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You subconsciously activate your power armor to stop your forward movement. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You stand at the forefront of a row of neat formations, and the cold light shines down from above you. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Your gaze also scans each and every one of the astral knights before you. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Therefore, the Valfar relief fleet that we are about to join will be a powerful force gathering the elite strength of 15 chapters. It is also the only relief force that the Valfar system can count on. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. However, if you think that this will be an easy battle of crushing victory, then I can tell you very bluntly that this is a very wrong idea. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket, because this will be the most difficult battle in the history of the Astral Knights chapter. It may even be the last battle of the Astral Knights chapter. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You suddenly widen your eyes and shout loudly. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You stare at each and every one of the Astartes, who have blank expressions but whose battle wills are about to erupt like volcanoes in the depths of their hearts. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You suddenly show everyone a heartfelt, radiant smile. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Even if I am standing here at this moment, I, as the chapter master, cannot guarantee that you will be able to survive. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The only thing that I can guarantee to you is that I will fight alongside you until the last moment when death arrives. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. As soon as the words leave your mouth, you raise a strong arm covered in a ceramite shell with a solemn expression and extend it above your head. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The ceramite gauntlet, clenched into a fist, constantly reflects metallic luster like dotted stars under the illumination of the cold light above. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You take a deep breath forcefully and let out a hoarse roar to the crowd before you. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Astral Knights. Destruction is salvation. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. In an instant, the huge sound wave from every Astartes almost completely overturns the ceiling of the entire training ground, repeatedly echoing inside the mid-level deck of the battle barge. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Astral Knights. Destruction is salvation. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. In the next moment, the Astral Knights almost uniformly raise their strong arms and roar with all their might. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. For the Emperor. For the Astral Knights. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. However, at this moment, a whisper as fine as a mosquito's hum suddenly drifts out of your mouth, eventually completely submerged in the deafening depths of the battle cry. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. May the Emperor protect your loyal souls, and also light the way for you to return to the Golden Throne. Close black lens bracket. Month 1. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The battle group's entire fleet finally emerged from the warp and successfully arrived in the Valfar system. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Acting on astropathic intelligence from the Imperium, you redirected the fleet towards a frozen planet composed entirely of solid ammonia, located the 7th furthest from the system's central star. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. This desolate, frozen planet has now officially become the assembly point for the fleets of various battle groups. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. At this moment, in addition to the frozen planet's orbital space, even the nearby 2 mining satellites are almost completely filled with the massive ships belonging to other battle groups in the Imperial Navy. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. There are battle group flagships or battle barges carrying Xenos technology and bearing symbolic significance, as well as agile cruisers and powerful battleships. The number of escorts and various support ships is even more difficult to estimate. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket is the only rescue battle group personally led by your chapter master. You were responsible for setting up the meeting location on the Storm, a battle barge. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You led several company captains under your command in receiving the company captains from various battle groups, as well as Fleet Admiral Kruss, the supreme commander responsible for coordinating this campaign. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. After the chaplains from each battle group, carrying incense and chanting prayers, established their respective battle group shrines within the Hall of Hatred, the battle group's grand hall on the upper decks of the Storm. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You finally gathered together to begin the pre-battle conference on how to stop the world engine. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. However, in the time that followed, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Everyone erupted into a fierce argument over who should launch the first attack on the world engine, which then escalated into personal attacks on each other's battle groups. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The Aurora chapter and the Invaders chapter, whose power armor colors were similar, both predominantly green, were the first to engage in a verbal assault against each other. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. A company captain from the Blood Angels chapter maintained a grim, pale face. He subconsciously licked the thin, sharp fangs in his mouth, his blood-red eyes occasionally glancing at anyone who passed in front of him. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. A Crimson Fists company captain with a stern and solemn expression walked to the side of the Ultramarines, 7th company captain, and they began discussing something in hushed tones. Even Fleet Admiral Kruss leaned in, listening intently. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. However, just as several other battle groups' company captains began shouting, intending to come down to the field for a one-on-one duel, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You, who had remained silent and taciturn, casually drew your bolter and pulled the trigger, firing into the ceiling of the Hall of Hatred. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. In an instant, the roar of the bolter drowned out the crowd's arguments and discussions. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. First, you surveyed these Astartes company captains, whom you had never met before, with a serious expression. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Then, you slowly said to everyone must acknowledge that each battle group has its own combat methods and tactical habits. In extreme cases, even the weapon configurations on the ships are different. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. But the current situation requires everyone to put aside these differences and disputes, and unite to form a powerful force in order to save the Valfar system and resist the ravages of the world engine. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Immediately afterward, you unreservedly began to tell everyone in earnest about the almost miraculous technology and equipment of the Necrons that you had either known about or seen. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You wanted to awaken the company captains' vigilance and make them put down their stubbornness and arrogance. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Unfortunately, apart from the Crimson Fists company captain, the Ultramarines, 7th company captain, and Fleet Admiral Kruss, among others, who seemed to have listened to your advice and were deep in thought, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The other battle group's company captains only expressed superficial respect for your words. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You seemed to see a hint of mockery and contempt for the Star Knights from their expressionless faces and the depths of their eyes. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You subconsciously took a deep breath. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You tried your best to suppress the trace of anger that was gradually surging in your chest. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You slowly retreated to the side, allowing the pre-battle conference, which had returned to its normal course, to continue. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. In the end, everyone still supported Fleet Admiral Kruss as the supreme commander of this campaign, rather than a mere figurehead for the joint fleet. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. After the meeting, you spoke with Fleet Admiral Kruss alone, and he chose to listen to some of your suggestions. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Thus, this massive joint rescue fleet quickly completed its reorganization and deployment. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. With the fleet led by Fleet Admiral Kruss as the main force, and the fleet commanders of each battle group as auxiliary commanders. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You officially launched a tentative attack on the Necrons, world engine. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Currently, the Necrons, world engine is rampaging through the void lanes of the life-bearing planet located the 9th furthest from the star in the Valfar system. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. If you cannot stop its advance, close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Then this industrial planet will be completely destroyed, and tens of millions of Imperial citizens who do not have time to evacuate will become victims. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Soon after, the vanguard ships of the Joint Fleet finally collided and exchanged fire for the first time with the world engine, whose size almost blotted out the sky. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Along with countless laser arrays and macrocannon batteries on the ships unleashing deadly beams that cut through the cold void. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You also saw clearly for the first time from the screens on the flagship's bridge this planetary-scale weapon ship, seemingly perpetually shrouded in thick, dark clouds and rolling, terrifying lightning. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. On the surface of this Xenos technological construct, which was the size of a planet, there seemed to be a layer of shimmering silver, an unknown shield, constantly covering it. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. At this moment, the terrifying attacks from the Vanguard fleet. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The dense laser beams and macrocannon fire that almost obscured half of the cold void, and the continuous bombardment of countless exploding missiles and torpedoes, still failed to penetrate that unknown shield in the slightest. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Not even a single ripple of energy fluctuation was triggered. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. This is one of the external manifestations of the Necrons' technological power, and also the ultimate expression of materialism. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You crossed your arms and pondered with a frown. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Just then, the Vanguard fleet, which was still attacking, seemed to be planning to adjust the formation of each ship and regroup for an even more powerful barrage. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. However, in the next second, beams of silver light, blooming like lightning, suddenly shot outward from the interior of the world engine. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. They pierced through the void shields of the Vanguard fleet almost instantly, and even easily tore open the metal hulls of the massive ships. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Rumble. Close black lens bracket. Thank you all for your support. 296. Star Knight, World Engine, we live towards death. AI model, Gemini 2.0 Flash. In the cold void of space, no sound can travel. However, the terrifying shockwaves from the successive explosions of the Vanguard fleet began to shake the midsection of the battle barge's fleet, creating countless ripples on the colorful void shields. Inside the Storm's End bridge, a cacophony of information and alarms from the battlefield blared incessantly. Your fleet master immediately stepped forward, past your side. He attempted to coordinate with the naval marshal and other fleet masters through the communication devices, directing the Vanguard fleet that was being decimated by the world engine. However, the Necron world engine gave them no chance. The massive planet-sized warship, enduring the relentless barrage of laser beams, macro cannons, and missile torpedoes from countless naval cruisers and battleships in the fleet's rear, continued to advance slowly. This resulted in the escort ships and the wreckage of the Vanguard fleet, unable to change course in time, being easily crushed like mosquitoes by the world engine's silver shields, turning into countless fragments drifting in the cold void. The next moment, a lunar-class heavy cruiser, seemingly from the Crimson Fist's chapter, swiftly detached from the combined fleet and advanced alone. Its massive metal hull continuously traversed the scattered wreckage, directly confronting the world engine's path. Plasma lances, like the Emperor's wrath, suddenly tore through the cold void, unleashing a continuous and terrifying barrage against the advancing world engine. But this level of bombardment had no effect on the world engine, which was covered by a layer of silver shields. Instantly, a silver lance, erupting outwards, pierced through the lunar-class heavy cruiser's void shields, shearing off most of the bridge and disrupting the cruiser's desperate attempt to fire its Nova cannon. The next second, the Necron world engine, as if deliberately displaying its power, unhesitatingly chose to continue its advance. It did not stop until the massive planet-sized warship had crushed the lunar-class heavy cruiser's slender hull inch by inch. At this moment, the combined fleet's public communication channel seemed to fall into a strange silence. Apart from the distress signals and intermittent screams from the damaged warships and wreckage, there seemed to be no sound from any commanding officers. You stood in place with your arms crossed, your expression indifferent. Your gaze was fixed on the horrific scene displayed on the bridge's screen, remaining silent. Just then, Fleet Master Shekez slammed his palm heavily on the metal casing of the communication device, creating a loud noise that startled several mortal crewmen wearing communication headsets. You ignored the female Captain Gretus's angry reprimand of Fleet Master Shekez. You took a deep breath and slowly let out a sigh. The first close encounter between the Imperium of Man and the planet-sized weapon warship world engine ended in the utter failure of your stubborn and arrogant Valfar combined fleet. The second month, accompanied by terrifying energy tides sweeping across the entire planet. The industrial planet, the ninth furthest from the Valfar system star, was completely transformed into a dead world by the world engine's Gauss orbital cannons. Countless Imperial citizens who did not have time to evacuate, along with their shelter facilities, were completely turned into drifting black ash in the cold void. During this time, none of you had time to mourn. The reorganized combined fleet repeatedly attacked the world engine. But apart from losing more ships, the gains were negligible. And the most frustrating thing for the entire Valfar rescue fleet was that not only could your ships, void shields, not withstand any of the enemy's attacks. Even your trump cards, the Nova cannons and vortex torpedoes from the chapter's capital ships, could not shake the world engine's silver shields in the slightest. You were forced into a war of attrition with the world engine, a war of ships, and attempted to discuss new offensive strategies. After several heated arguments involving bolters, the company commanders of all the other chapters unanimously decided to use the old method, boarding actions. They would have Astartes use assault boats to attempt to forcibly board the world engine, hoping to disrupt its silver shields and create an opportunity for the combined fleet to attack. You discussed it once more with Imperial Navy Marshal Krutz and the Ultramarines, 7th Company Captain, and ultimately agreed to this desperate decision. Thus, before the other chapters could react, the company commander of the Invaders chapter volunteered, stating that 3 Terminator squads from his company were willing to undertake this mission of no return. After determining the main assault force, everyone returned to their respective ships to prepare for the next, even more intense, battle. At the same time, the world engine, having just destroyed an industrial planet, unhesitatingly charged towards the next human planet, blocking its path. Of course, your losses and failures were not without some gains. Through the sacrifice of countless escort ships, you had gradually figured out some of the world engine's movement patterns. Any Imperial ship that approached it to a certain extent would be subjected to a devastating attack. However, if the distance between the two sides was too great, and there was no indication of continued tracking, the world engine seemed not to care. You decided to take advantage of this weakness. Soon after, the reassembled combined fleet immediately crossed the world engine's invisible warning line. Escort ships screened the cruisers and battleships, launching a preemptive attack. Countless plasma lances and macro cannons, mixed with a constant stream of laser beams, unleashed relentless bombardments against the world engine's rear. Their only role was to attract the world engine's attention on the main battlefield. To buy time for a capital ship belonging to the Invaders chapter, which had detached far from the combined fleet, to approach from the flank. In order to allow the capital ship to release the landing craft carrying the Terminator squads. At this moment, everything seemed to be proceeding according to the planned steps. The world engine, which was moving forward, was indeed attracted by the combined fleet's renewed attack. The massive planet-sized weapon warship immediately rotated its rounded silver sphere, changed its course, and launched a counterattack against the combined fleet's position. Silver lances continuously bloomed outwards from the interior of its sphere, destroying the combined fleet's ships. At this moment, the chapter's capital ship, which had already sailed to the far side of the world engine, immediately opened its launch bays, releasing several landing craft carrying the Terminator squads. These inconspicuous landing craft, hidden in the metal wreckage and energy flares, quickly traversed the distant space and lunged towards the world engine's rounded sphere. As the distance between the two sides decreased, red melta charges slammed into the world engine's silver shields. Still, it had no effect, not even causing a ripple of energy. The landing craft pilot, who had expected this, immediately sent a boarding signal to the Terminator squad inside the cabin. The next second, taking advantage of the brief gap when the landing craft suddenly changed its flight direction, with its belly narrowly skimming past the world engine's silver shields. 3 Terminator squads from the Invaders chapter unhesitatingly activated the teleportation devices inside their Terminator power armor and teleported onto the interior of the world engine. 297. Star Knight, World Engine, we live towards death. AI model, Gemini 2.0 Flash. At the same time, you stood before the screens on the bridge, closing your eyes with an expressionless face. You were unwilling to look closely at the terrifying and tragic state of those 3 Terminator squads and their ultimate fate. At this moment, right there on that silver shield that even spatial teleportation devices couldn't penetrate. It seemed as if an incredibly scarlet fleshy pigment had been evenly smeared across it. If viewed from the cold void, it would appear as if the world engine's perfectly round sphere had slightly opened a long, narrow, bloody eye towards the outside, as if mocking the Astartes chapters for their overestimation of themselves. Just then, Fleet Master Shazay, with 12 service studs nailed into his forehead, wore an ashen expression. He widened his eyes forcefully, staring intently at the cruel scene rapidly captured on the bridge screens, as if to firmly engrave it into the depths of his memory. Though they were not battle brothers from the Star Knights chapter themselves. However, faced with a group of battlefield comrades, all Astartes, encountering such humiliating and even cruel deaths, any human of the Imperium would feel empathy and resentment. You slowly opened your eyes, taking a deep breath. You suddenly turned your head to look at Fleet Master Shazay. Notify the joint fleet on the front lines to retreat temporarily. This offensive attempt has failed. Don't increase casualties unnecessarily, you said to him calmly. Also, reassemble the chapter's battle brothers. It's time for Star Knights to make important choices. You hesitated slightly, but ultimately made your final decision. You couldn't prevent the Star Knights chapter from embarking on their destined path. But before that, you still wanted to make some difficult changes. You activated your power armor and walked towards the outside of the bridge. The 3rd month. In order to stop the world engine's rampage, almost all of the numerous powerful and auxiliary ships in the joint fleet were lost. Only a weak fleet remained, consisting of just over 100 battered frigates, incomplete destroyers, and transport ships with insufficient supplies. And after Imperial Navy Marshal Krass and his naval flagship were lost in a futile attack on the world engine. The main battleships and flagships of the entire Valve Joint Rescue Fleet were reduced to only 5. Among them was your flagship, the battle barge Storm. Now, throughout the Valve System's star region, there were metal wrecks of ships everywhere, the tragic corpses of countless mortal crewmen and Astartes buried in the sea of stars. Even so, the world engine, having already destroyed 2 life-bearing planets, remained unscathed. It continued to move its massive, round sphere towards the most populous hive world, Vavencaster. At this moment, inside the Hall of Hatred on the battle barge Storm, the company captains, lacking the suppression of a supreme commander, were erupting in fierce arguments. A company captain from the Crimson Fists proposed that the entire joint fleet temporarily retreat. To summon naval fleets from other sectors and the Mechanicum's investigation fleets for support, and then launch another offensive against the world engine. However, when you showed them the world engine's continued trajectory and the next hive world it was about to reach, the Crimson Fist Company captain retreated to the back of the chapter shrine with a blank expression, falling into silence. Vavencaster, an unremarkable hive world, with roughly over 2 billion Imperial citizens. I know the joint fleet has suffered heavy losses, and the attacks on the world engine have been fruitless. But I am not willing to give up. The Star Knights chapter will not give up easily. You indifferently scanned the silent chapter company captains, and said in a low voice. Then you tell me, what else can we do? We have already tried everything. No weapon can penetrate the world engine's shield, not even my Terminator squad could teleport inside. What solutions can your Star Knights chapter possibly have? The company captain from the Invaders chapter glared at you angrily, issuing a near-roaring question. At that moment, you narrowed your eyes slightly. You suddenly raised a heavy magnetic boot and stomped heavily on the metal floor of the Hall of Hatred. This battle barge Storm is an ancient ship from the Zarforge world. Its sturdiness far exceeds that of ordinary battle barges, therefore, I intend to gamble with it against the Necrons, world engine. You slowly grinned, a touch of mad ferocity on your face, and slowly said to everyone around you. Emperor on Terra, have the Star Knights chapter gone mad? Leaving aside the preciousness of a main battleship to the entire chapter, haven't you forgotten the tragic state of the 3 Terminator squads from the Invaders chapter? How can you be sure that the battle barge Storm will definitely be able to break through their shield? A company captain from the Aurora chapter widened his eyes, speaking to you before the silent crowd could. Chapter Master Amrad, please wake up. Our reckless advance will only lead to total annihilation. At that time, Vavencaster will still be destroyed by the Necrons, therefore, esteemed Chapter Master, we have no choice but to abandon their lives. It doesn't matter anymore. If your consciences as Astartes can bear it, the Star Knights chapter will not stop you from leaving. You glanced at everyone with an expressionless face, and said calmly. Moreover, all consequences will be borne solely by us Star Knights. My only request is to seize this opportunity that we have earned with our lives, and completely end the world engine. As soon as you finished speaking, the company captains of the other dozen or so chapters were silent for a moment, and then they nodded in agreement to your request. Immediately afterwards, everyone walked out of the Hall of Hatred without hesitation. The company captain of the Aurora chapter seemed to hesitate for a moment, but still followed behind the others. At this time, the 7th company captain from the Ultramarines chapter became the last person to remain there. Chapter Master Amrad, did you inform me in advance to stay behind in order to find a way out for your chapter? The man slowly stepped forward, driving his deep blue power armor, staring at you and said. Yes, and it is also because I believe in the honor and character of the Ultramarines chapter. I will order 100 Star Knights, carrying some precious supplies and all of the dreadnoughts, to remain on your flagship. That is the only spark I have preserved for the Star Knights chapter. You were silent for a moment, looking at the other party with a solemn expression and said. As for their commander, that young company captain named Sozang Alexei, after my death, he will be the Star Knights chapter. 298. Star Knight World Engine, we live towards death v. AI model, Gemini 2.0 Flash. Open black lens bracket month 4. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket accompanying the orders sent from the Bridge of the Storm, a battle barge. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket loaded with 100 Space Marine Knights, along with precious resources and several ancient dreadnoughts. The Thunderhawk transports slowly moved into the flagship of the Ultramarines chapter. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Subsequently, the remaining joint fleet immediately retreated all ships to a position behind. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. In the cold void, no frigates or other specialized ships covered the flanks of the ships, leaving the Storm battle barge as the sole spearhead of the attack. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. At this moment, you have donned your metal helmet and are leading the entire Space Marine Knights chapter, standing on the deck of the ship's hold. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. A large number of assault vehicles and a small number of landing pods stand behind you. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Countless precious technological relics and power weapons were sent to each Space Marine Knight by the Techmarines. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You even thoughtfully personally presented each Space Marine Knight with a Melta bomb as a blessing. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Inside the bridge located in the core hold, orders from Fleet Master Scheherazade were methodically issued to everyone. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Countless mortal crew members formed damage control teams, quickly carrying repair servitors ahead to important locations such as the bow and belly of the ship. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Their presence will increase the chances of success for the impending violent impact. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Immediately following, even the few remaining fighter squadrons on the deck leapt out into the cold void like worker bees guarding a hive. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. When all preparations were complete, the storm battle barge unhesitatingly launched a terrifying, unrestrained sprint into the void ahead. Open black lens bracket. Its only target was the planet-killing warship, the World Engine, about to reach Vavangard. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. As the distance between the two sides continued to decrease and shorten, the World Engine also seemed to have detected your presence. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. It immediately stopped its headlong rush and once again adjusted the facing direction of its rounded sphere. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. According to the intelligence information you deduced, that site is actually the location of the opponent's main weapon. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. It is also where you must be more cautious. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. In the next moment, crescent-shaped alien fighters belonging to the Necrons suddenly rose from the thick dark clouds beneath the silver shield, densely and rapidly pouncing towards the storm battle barge. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Without command orders from the bridge, the few remaining fighter squadrons immediately went forward to meet them. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Even if they used their own vehicles as the final weapon, the pilots had to clear a path for the storm battle barge. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. In an instant, countless scorching lasers and plasma lances once again cut through the cold void. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The storm battle barge's defensive turrets and a large number of weapon arrays also joined in the fierce attack to resist the alien fighter swarm. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. And accompanied by streams of green Gauss beams piercing through the Imperium ship's multicolored void shields. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The storm battle barge's massive metal hull suffered considerable damage almost instantly. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. However, at this time, the ship's machine spirit Cortana, who was nearly telepathically connected to Fleet Master Scheherazade and fully cooperated, had completely taken over the storm battle barge. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. A considerable portion of ship operations that ordinary crew members simply could not perform began to appear one by one in the cold void. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. A large number of close-in defense turrets were almost rotated to firing angles that were difficult to reach under normal circumstances, and terrifying laser arrays and plasma lances relentlessly bombarded the alien fighters, clearing a safe path for the battle barge's continued advance. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. At this moment, you could even clearly feel that the sailing speed of the entire ship seemed to have undergone earth-shaking changes. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Before long, the battered storm battle barge miraculously escaped the entanglement of the alien fighter swarm, leading the few surviving fighters to continue their terrifying, relentless charge towards the World Engine. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Chapter Master. 5 minutes until final impact. But most of the battle barge's hull is severely damaged. We can't carry out a soft landing. Fleet Master Scheherazade's urgent voice suddenly came from inside your metal helmet. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Then activate the reverse thrusters and let Cortana control the battle barge to force a hard landing. As long as the boarding party can successfully land on the surface of the World Engine, it will be a success. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You issued the order to the other party without hesitation. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Your magnetic boots were firmly attached to the ship's metal deck. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. The constant bombardment from enemy fighter swarms and the ship's own explosive shocks still caused your tall body to sway slightly. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. At this moment, the storm battle barge, with no way to retreat, had already opened the reactor engine to full power. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. While pouring out all the firepower of its defensive turrets into the nearby cold void, the massive metal hull displayed almost miraculous agility under the attack of the World Engine's silver lances. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Impact countdown 3 minutes. You once again heard Fleet Master Scheherazade's roar in your ear. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You took a deep breath and quickly waved your hand to the Space Marine Knights and vehicle drivers behind you who remained silent. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Immediately following, all the Astartes immediately lowered their heads to inspect the weapons and equipment on their bodies. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Storm bolters and various high-powered heavy weapons were tightly gripped in their palms, and power weapons were carried on the back of their power packs. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket and accompanied by bursts of violent shaking and explosions. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You began to see wisps of black smoke floating around in your field of vision, and you even smelled the burning of the hull in your breathing apparatus. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You clearly saw mortal crew members covered in blood, leading repair servitors stumbling through the interior of the ship's deck, desperately running to other ship compartments that were on the verge of collapse. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You had never formally announced your crazy plan to all the mortal crew members. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Apart from the Astartes, only Captain Gretus and the Navigator knew of your insane actions. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. But they all still chose to believe in your judgment and also decided to coexist and die with the Storm battle barge. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Impact countdown 1 minute. All crew members immediately seek shelter. Fleet Master Scheherazad's roar interrupted your thoughts. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You took a deep breath and gripped the metal handle of the storm bolter in your palm. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Impact countdown 55, 54. At this moment, you suddenly heard the mechanical voice of the ship's machine spirit Cortana echoing in your ear. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. That cold tone seemed to reveal a last trace of remembrance and longing for the void of the universe. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. Cortana, activate full frequency broadcast, target, everyone. You suddenly issued a final order to the ship's machine spirit. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. 30, 29. The cold countdown from the ship's machine spirit Cortana continued. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. But your vision immediately saw a green indicator light suddenly light up inside the metal helmet. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. To all Navy crew members and battle brothers, some say that death is the end of everything, but I believe that before this end, we can at least do a noble deed for the human Imperium, so that we are worthy of the title, Fighting Gods. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. You blinked subconsciously and said solemnly into the communications device. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. I am the chapter master of the Space Marine Knights, and also a coin sent by the Emperor. Regardless of whether the outcome of this battle is successful or not, it is my greatest honor to fight alongside all of you. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. At this moment, accompanied by the ubiquitous alarm buzzing, the storm battle barge's impact countdown had approached the final end. Close black lens bracket. Open black lens bracket. 3, 2, 1. Close black lens bracket. Thank you all for your support. 299. Star Knight World Engine. We live towards death. VI. AI model. Gemini 2.0 Flash. In the frigid void, the Necron World Engine seemed unprepared for the Storm's Hammer battle barge's reckless maneuver. Its main weapons, not yet fully aligned, failed to offer adequate resistance, leaving the colossal metal hull to crash violently into the World Engine's internal space. The impact was accompanied by a deafening cacophony of grinding and collision. Enveloped in a shroud of roaring flames, the Storm's Hammer battle barge brutally pierced through the World Engine's atmosphere and silver shield. It hurtled towards the alien structures dominated by towering black pyramids, crashing down with devastating force. Almost instantly, the Storm's Hammer, its hull nearly cleaved in two, slammed into the apex of a black pyramid. The impact unleashed a cataclysm of explosions and shockwaves that rippled outwards. In the preceding seconds, over a dozen drop pods, each carrying Astartes Space Marines, had detached from the battle barge's deck, scattering into the depths of the World Engine. However, due to the limited number of drop pods, you and the majority of the Astral Knights were forced to endure the horrific impact relying solely on your power armor and the battle barge's metallic structure. Even with your mag boots firmly locked onto the metal deck, you felt as though you were trapped inside a high-powered washing machine, relentlessly tossed and turned. You even briefly slipped into a state of unconsciousness. Just when you thought you were on the verge of death, you abruptly snapped back to consciousness. At that moment, your metal helmet was beyond repair. Loud alarms blared and sparks danced within your field of vision. Ignoring the chaotic environment, you ripped off your ruined metal helmet. You violently coughed up a mouthful of rapidly clotting blood. You then realized that you, along with a large section of metal deck plating, had been hurled onto the black ground not far from the battle barge's wreckage. Assemble. Assemble to me. All surviving battle brothers. Our destination is reached, victory is within our grasp. You activated your power armor, now riddled with cracks, and rose quickly, shouting towards the wreckage of the battle barge. Your storm bolter, once firmly held in your hand, was nowhere to be found. You casually detached a power axe from the power pack equipped with an iron halo and began to walk forward. Soon after, astral knights whose power armor was scarred and battered but whose weapons and equipment remained intact quickly gathered before you. However, after you and the few surviving company captains conducted a headcount, you discovered that from the crash landing alone, the Astral Knights chapter had lost nearly 2 companies of battle brothers. If you included those scattered within the ship's wreckage, those mortally wounded, and those who had detached early from the deck, you realized that only 400 Astral Knights remained before you. More importantly, with the utter destruction of the battle barge, the assault vehicles you had intended to deploy were completely destroyed. Whatever battlefield situation you might encounter, you could only rely on your battle brothers. Just then, before you could reorganize your battle lines, blindingly bright green beams of energy suddenly pierced through the lingering black smoke and roaring flames. They streaked towards your ranks with terrifying speed. Enemy attack. Suppressive fire. Beware of enemy energy weapons. You instinctively roared at the top of your lungs. Alone, you activated your power armor, brandishing your power axe and charging towards the enemy. Accompanied by the thunderous roar of bolters, the trails of melta beams, and the launch of portable missiles, the counterattack of the Astral Knights unfolded for the first time on the Necron's domain. The retaliatory force of the Astral Knights quickly unfolded, unleashing a terrifying barrage of fire upon the enemy's position. In the next moment, countless Necron warriors with slightly hunched metallic spines, wielding Gauss flares glowing with green light, emerged from the wisps of smoke and launched a relentless, advancing assault towards the chapter's position. Instantly, Astartes' space marines struck by the horrific green beams collapsed without so much as a sound. Their bodies and power armor were reduced to a cloud of dissipating green atoms, vanishing completely into thin air. The black metal bodies of the Necrons, however, were torn into silent skeletal frames by the devastating impact of storm bolters and melta beams. But as the battle continued, the Astral Knights noticed that even more Necrons seemed to be joining the fray. Even under repeated barrages of fire, their numbers showed no sign of diminishing. Battle brothers. A portion of you, form assault squads. Locate their resurrection devices as quickly as possible. Otherwise, this battle will never end. You issued an order to the others while forcefully swinging your power axe. You brutally cleaved through the metal heads of several Necron warriors. You casually picked up a Necron Gauss flare from the ground and opened fire on the Necron warriors slowly closing in around you. Only sufficient physical damage can destroy their metal bodies. If your ammunition is exhausted, engage in close combat or pick up Necron weapons and continue the assault. You shouted without turning your head. The Gauss flare you wielded easily disintegrated the metal bodies of the Necrons. You immediately raised the power axe in your other hand and charged towards the position from which more Necron warriors were emerging. Just then, a Scorpic destroyer, standing 3 meters tall with only 3 metal limbs for its lower body, brandishing powerful limbs equipped with hyperface swords, suddenly emerged from the depths of the Necron warrior ranks and charged towards you. Without hesitation, you activated your power armor, leaping towards the ruined buildings to the side. At the same time, the Gauss flare you still held fired a barrage of green energy with incredible accuracy at the destroyer's metal limbs. In the next instant, just as the Scorpic destroyer began to fall heavily to the ground due to the sudden severing of one of its metal limbs, you had already adjusted your landing trajectory and position. Your mag boots slammed onto the wreckage of the ruined building, launching you high into the air. The power axe in your hand swung down towards the Scorpic destroyer's metal head. In that instant, a metal head with green light gradually fading from its eye sockets tumbled to the ground, producing a dull thud. You glanced down at the power axe with its completely warped blade, casually burying it into the Scorpic destroyer's metal body. You forcefully pried a familiar hyperface sword from the destroyer's limb, and rapidly raised the muzzle of the Gauss Flayer in your other hand. Astral Knights, follow me. Thank you for your support. 300. Star Knight World Engine. We live towards death. 7. AI Model, Gemini 2.0 Flash. You brandished your phase sword and charged into the heart of a large group of Necron warriors. Each sweep and strike of yours effortlessly destroyed their metallic bodies or heads. Thanks to your frantic charge, several squads of Space Marine Knights also managed to break into the Necron offensive line. They imitated your actions, picking up the alien weapons dropped by the Necrons and quickly falling back to support you. Leading these squads, you successfully navigated the metal tide of Necron warriors, losing only 7 or 8 battle brothers, and entered the depths of the black corridor located underground. You immediately spotted a skeletal figure resembling a cryptek, holding a metallic staff, along with a resurrection device behind him and Canoptek servitors charging towards you. You took a deep breath, raised your Gauss Flayer, and pulled the trigger. The other battle brothers also immediately raised their alien weapons, unleashing suppressive fire in the direction of the approaching enemies. Without hesitation, you retrieved a melt-a-bomb from the back of your power pack. Just then, a terrifying green beam suddenly grazed your heavy shoulder armor. Even the Iron Halo's defensive field was rendered useless. The enemy's attack obliterated a several-inch deep, smooth groove in your shoulder armor, scattering particles of dissipating green energy. But you seemed oblivious to it, or rather, you had already disregarded your own life and death. You quickly set the melt-a-bomb to a very short detonation time. You hurled the activated melt-a-bomb towards the cryptek's head. At this moment, the Canoptek servitors and Necron warriors seemed to recognize your action, analyzing the immense danger the melt-a-bomb posed. However, your battle brothers' extremely refined shooting skills completely halted the enemy's last-ditch efforts. Accompanied by an extremely dazzling flash of explosive light and a burst of searing heat expanding outwards. The Necron cryptek, along with his Canoptek servitors and resurrection device, were completely melted into a pool of orange-red, high-temperature liquid metal. At that moment, this Necron offensive force completely lost its means of continued resistance and could no longer be resurrected. Soon after, the remaining forces that had eliminated the majority of the Necrons arrived at your underground location. At the same time, you successfully received intelligence reports from those battle brothers who had disembarked from the battle barge earlier. In other parts of the world engine, they had discovered a metal mausoleum specifically used to imprison human slaves. And from the mouths of those human slaves, they learned that the world engine's name was Berxus. More importantly, the Necrons also have a ruling class. Currently controlling Berxus is a Necron overlord named Hethkyros. You listened to all the information from the battle brothers. You rested one hand on the green glowing phase sword, and pondered for a moment. You immediately ordered the battle brothers in the distance to gather all available forces and attempt to locate and destroy the world engine's shield generator. And you would lead the remaining main force of the Space Marine Knights chapter on a decapitation assassination mission against the Necron overlord. After all, facing a world engine the size of a planet and countless Necrons. You and your few hundred Astartes were simply a drop in the bucket. Therefore, you had to use every means possible to achieve victory. You quickly reorganized the squad and allowed the battle brothers whose ammunition had been exhausted to replace it with alien Necron weapons. You began to lead the Space Marine Knights to explore deeper into the underground. As time passed, squads of Necron warriors gradually converged on your position. Although your combat effectiveness had increased significantly after replacing the alien weapons. However, facing so many enemies, you had to search for underground corridors to retreat while stubbornly resisting the enemy's constant attacks. Some time later, having just lost a battle squad, you accidentally stumbled into a large, ancient, and dilapidated underground mausoleum palace. However, before you could briefly rest and recover your depleted strength, several scout squads of battle brothers unfortunately disturbed a large group of scarab swarms. Although these car-sized scarab swarms do not possess ranged attack capabilities, their large size and ability to fly have caused you considerable trouble. Most importantly, within each of their round, metallic abdomens, fist-sized Canoptek scarabs became the scarab swarm's hidden trump card. In the blink of an eye, a battle squad that advanced to engage in close combat was silently overwhelmed and completely devoured by a large number of Canoptek scarabs. Retreat. Everyone retreat temporarily. Brother Jagger, use your melta-bombs to buy us some time. You desperately propelled your power armor backwards, while loudly shouting to the battle brothers beside you. Soon after, accompanied by a series of intense flashes of light from the melta-bombs. You, with only 300 or so survivors, completely withdrew from the area of the underground mausoleum palace. However, just as you were pondering how to proceed next, Librarian Hazel, who had been following you, came to your side with a techmarine. Chapter Master, I have made some unexpected discoveries, Hazel said solemnly, staring into your eyes. Then speak, you said, nodding to him after a slight silence. Chapter Master, during the battle just now, I discovered that some Canoptech scarabs temporarily lost control and did not attack us. Or rather, they were temporarily deprived of control by another mysterious force. Moreover, those scarabs that lost control sent me a simple message that can only be understood intuitively. Hazel took a deep breath and said concisely. The message only contained one thing: help, something is crying out for help. If we exclude the possibility of mechanical failure of the Necrons themselves, then I strongly suspect that within the world engine, there is another powerful force hidden. Perhaps, that is the power that can bring us final victory. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.